All right, welcome guests. We're joined by the legendary Chad Nicholls and Nick Trigili again.
I'm a legend too. Come on.
I was going to say, he's the legend and infamous.
Yeah, there you go.
Before we get started, I just want the audience to know that I'm usually a morning person. I'm very obsessed about my circadian rhythms. So recently, Nick has been throwing them off a little bit. So this morning, I actually slept at 7 in the morning. I'm totally out of it. And the funny thing is that my SR9009 just arrived in the mail today, and I didn't know about it. Had I taken it a couple of hours before, I would have been fine. But now, if I take it, I'll be awake for
forever.
Dude, if he hangs out with us much longer, dude, his whole
I know. I told him, I said,
out the door, dude.
Because he's like, what are the odds of getting Chad? And I said, listen, I can get him on, but it ain't gonna be like no morning time podcast. We're gonna be going into the morning. I said last time we were on for like 6 hours.
Yeah, so I just want to give a shout out to the guys at Amino Asylum. They took care of me again. I want everyone to know I do not take any cash from Amino Asylum. I just like their product, and that's why I recommend the SR9009. I want everyone to know that. So getting started, Chad, I want to tell you something. Do you have a nickname in the bodybuilding world? Like all of the other bodybuilding coaches have a nickname.
Well, it depends on who you talk to, I guess. I can think of some good ones and some bad ones. Nah, man, not really. The diet doc is what I've always went as. I set up an account a long time ago, and then I wrote a bunch of stuff for like Muscle and Fitness and Flex under that name, the diet doc, and it just that's kind of what I've always kind of stuck with, basically.
I gave you a nickname on the last podcast I think we had, which was the King of Empiricism. Empiricism being actual practice, the king of actual practice, the guy who got things done, the guy who knows. Because I'm sort of a nerd. I don't know how things actually get done. And this is the king of empiricism. So I'm so excited to talk to you.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I mean, when I first started, and I think me and Nick talked about this one time, I was actually a cop. For 5 years, and my wife's career kind of took off, and I started working with athletes, and I saw like all of these guys like doing so many things wrong, and they were at the highest level, and they were just the basic things, like just common sense things that they were doing wrong. And so, I sat down with her, and her conditioning was always spot on, usually, and not usually, always.
Yeah, always.
And I said, listen, I think that there is an opportunity here. I think that there is an opportunity to, do something very unique that has never been done before. And I feel like there's, a calling for it. I think that there's, an opportunity. And I remember sitting down with my sergeant, and I was like, I'm going to take a year's leave of absence, and I'm going to become like a professional trainer where I work with just professional athletes. And he's like, really? He goes, it sounds like really unique, right? And he goes, does it pay a lot of money? And I go, I don't think it pays anything right now. It doesn't pay nothing. But I think the opportunity is there to make a lot of money. And he's like, why would you quit a job that pays no money? And I go, I just foresee the future of being, something that is very lucrative down the road. And
what year was that?
That was probably 93, maybe. 1993, yeah. And I took the year's leave of absence, then I quit after that and never looked back.
Okay, well, I got to start at the beginning. We always start our podcast, but I'm into genetics and ancestry. I was curious, your name Nicholls, where's your ancestry from? Is it British?
Well, I'm going to tell you, it's kind of weird, actually, that you asked that. So we always thought that it was actually British. That is actually true. My mom, I had like a lot of kind of England, and British and that kind of ancestry, but a lot of my family was actually also Indian. So we were kind of thinking it was kind of a flip possibly. We had no idea. So my youngest son, one of the things that he wanted to do last year was a 23andMe. And he absolutely wanted to do that. It was one of the things that he just absolutely had to have. He thought he was Irish, and we're like, listen, at no point are you Irish, right? He like loves everything about Irish. Like one of the things he wanted, like on top of this, was like a kilt for Christmas. I'm thinking like, this kid is crazy. Like he wants like this thing. So we get
which one? The older one?
The youngest.
Oh, the youngest one. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Loves Notre Dame. Like he loves the whole Irish thing, right?
That's so funny.
So we get the results back, and me and my wife are looking at it, and we're like, no fucking way. 39% Irish.
Wow.
The Irish, like the kid just knew.
That's so funny.
And nobody in my family had any idea. I called my sister, like, did you realize that we're like Irish? She's like, why do you say that? Like, why would you think we're Irish? I'm like, because we just had a DNA test.
So Chad, let me tell you some things. I'm actually, originally I was a researcher at Family Tree DNA and Ancestry, specifically one line of Y-DNA Ancestry, which comes from the father's line. I'm actually really nerdy about Ancestry and that stuff, reading all the papers about it.
Right.
It's my hobby. Want to let you know, 23andMe's breakdown, actually, number one, they've been called into question by former employees for intentionally putting, like, this is how it works. Okay, so basically you have a genome, and you have what are called centimorgans, which are measurements of groups of the genome. If you have a big part of your genome from one area, they say, hey, you probably are from that area.
From that area, I got you.
But you could also have a lot of small parts that are similar to that area, but may have come from other parts in the world. And they could potentially say, oh, those parts, maybe he's Irish, actually. Now, they don't usually do this for Irish people, but they usually do this for American Indians and African Americans. So what they'll do is add a little bit of American Indian to people when it's sort of, because it's not black and white at all.
Right.
At all, in terms of the breakdowns. That's not black and white. What is black and white is the father's line and the mother's mother's line. I can tell you where that's from. In terms of the ways they break them down, not so reliable. I talked to Dave about this. Dave thought he was something. I told him, don't trust. It's really not very believable. Another thing you could do, though, is that every other website has a different breakdown. For example, Ancestry.com has the largest database.
That's what I was wondering, if we had one.
I'll tell you about all of them right now. Yeah, so number one, Ancestry.com has actually the largest database of individual DNA from people, from customers. So if you want to find your relatives, Ancestry.com is the best one. 23andMe is second best. Now, the best one at finding details of your actual ancestry from your male line and from your female line is Family Tree DNA. Those are the really scientific guys in terms of that side of it. Ancestry, less so. But you could get a breakdown also from all three of them and see the differences, and you'll be surprised.
Right.
Now, let me tell you why you may not be Irish. The reason is, so basically, what is an Irish person? An Irish person, Irish especially, not so much Scottish. Irish person is a Gaelic original inhabitant of the British Isles. See, what happened is the British Isles was invaded. Originally, the British Isles was populated by the same people who populated France and around that area after the last glacial maximum. They returned from around Spain. They used to live there, and they moved to Britain, and they settled there. Those were the Celts and the Picts and the Gaelic people and so on. Picts, by the way, interesting name. It actually means tattooed. It was the word for tattooed in Latin. So anyway, these people settled there. Those are the original British people. Then what happened is in 600, Germanic tribes called Anglo-Saxons invaded. They changed the language of the area, and they mixed, but not that much with the population. So who are the people that have less of this Germanic ancestry? People living in Wales, Scotland, and Ireland. In England, they have more of that. So that's number one. Then in around between 800 to the Battle of Hastings in 1033, all of these Vikings came and invaded. And they, especially in Scotland, spread their seed. So some of us who have Scottish ancestry, like myself, may have some of that Viking ancestry there. Those guys are noted by their Y-DNA haplogroup I. Whenever you see an I in England, that means you're Norman or Viking or something like that. And so what I'm trying to say to you is that if you're British at all, you have some Gaelic, Celtic, Pictish something. I do too. Yeah, go ahead.
Because what I thought was weird was, so we know, like, it was my side that we really didn't know a lot of, like, the backstory, I guess. But my wife, on the other hand, we knew that her mom's side came from Italy, and we knew that her father's side came from Russia. Like, we knew that because they literally, came here. Like, we know, that 100%. And those percentages were relatively low on both, which we thought was kind of weird.
That's weird.
So yeah, there we could talk about that also. But continuing a little bit about the just so you know, if you're interested in actually finding out your family tree from your father's side, I am extremely good at that. I have my ancestry from 1000.
Wow.
And it's accurate. Wow. It's no BS. It's very accurate. Even when places where I'm not sure, I have notes. I have a huge software in my I spent thousands of hours doing this for myself, but I could do it quickly for you because I've learned a lot. If you're interested. The second thing I wanted to mention is that, you know, old settlers in the US, they were called WASP, White Anglo-Saxon Protestants. Most of the original settlers are from Britain and then Scotland. Later, we had these settlers in the late 1800s that came from Wales, from Ireland, then from Italy, then from Russia with mostly Jewish immigration and so on. So the original, if you're from the original settlers in the US, like I am, you're probably Scottish, British mixture, or maybe some French even.
Yeah.
So that's some off-topic stuff.
This is kind of unique too. So because I've talked to a bundle of people that have had this. So like within that, they give you a percentage of Neanderthal.
Yes.
So how do you think that plays into it? Like, how do you think that?
So that's a very interesting phenomenon. So Africans don't have very much Neanderthal DNA because they didn't mix with them. The Neanderthals were in Europe. But what happened, not we, but scientists think, is that male Neanderthals raped female humans. And that's how it came. We're supposed to have between 2 to 4% Neanderthal DNA for Europeans. I have less because I'm half Arab. So my Arab side has very little, like my Arab cousins, you know, but my mother is like Neanderthal. So there's that. And then there's also Denisovan DNA, which not many people know about. The Denisovans were another species that also mixed with humans. They have a lot of DNA around Papua New Guinea, if I remember correctly. Denisovan DNA, those are the people that are black that have blonde hair. I don't know if you've ever seen them.
Yeah.
So those are the people in Papua New Guinea. So,
because I know that his Neanderthal like percentage was super high, like it was, I want to say 96% higher than everybody else, you know, like, so it was at the 96% range.
That's crazy.
And we were kind of thinking like, holy shit, like that's crazy.
What was yours? If you copy, you have to get yours and your wife's also to copy and to.
Yeah, that's what we were going to do. Like we originally, you know, because we were thinking originally we were going to get my oldest sons too. And then we were kind of thinking, well, hell, it's probably going to be almost, you know, identical to the younger ones. And I'm like, we ought to get both of ours so that we can compare,
What's
like,
Kim's
you know,
last
across
name?
the board. Her name is Shazevsky.
Oh, okay.
So,
actually I was going to ask you about that. She has Russian genetics, which is we're going to talk about with your son's genetics later. I'm really excited to talk about it. But okay, so that's in terms of ancestry. Where were you born? Which state are you from?
So I was born in Illinois. Yeah.
But you live in Missouri, right?
I live in Springfield, Missouri. So I grew up in actually a tiny little town called Moweaqua, Illinois. It was most people have heard of Decatur because that's where Archer Daniels Midland is based out of. So it's kind of, you know, it was a very blue collar town. Caterpillar was there, A.E. Staley's, and then Archer Daniels Midland. So it was a very, you know, working class town. Since then it's just kind of, you know, kind of deteriorated like a lot of those type of, you know, industries have. But we lived about 7 miles away from there. And then when I got older, we ended up moving to Decatur. That's where Kim is actually from. So she went to school in Decatur. And then my parents who worked at Illinois Power in Decatur retired, came to Springfield and opened up an antique store. And then when they were down here, right when they were opening it up, they were building a Gold's Gym. And so she was like, hey, they're building a Gold's Gym down here. And it was right at the time that I had just taken a leave of absence. And so I went down, talked to the owners, and they're like, listen, man, we'd like maybe for you to come down, potentially run this. And so then, you know, I ended up talking with Edd Connors. And Edd Connors was, and he was like, listen, it's something you were interested in doing. And like, yeah, maybe it'd be something I'd be interested in doing. And then I ended up running that for about a year and a half while I was, you know, down there. And then of course, then the owners just kind of took it over from that point and stuff. So it was kind of, you know, how we ended up here. We never really planned on staying, but it was just one of those things that we were doing so much traveling at the time because Kim's career, she was with Weider Nutrition and like so many different companies where she was just traveling all the time. So it was a really nice place to like come back to, but we never had planned on staying. And then, of course, she retired. And at that point, we were literally thinking like, probably we're going to move somewhere. Then she ended up getting pregnant. And so then we were kind of like, this seems like a really good spot to stay and raise kids, obviously. Yeah, so perfect. That's why we ended up staying.
You mentioned Kim already. I'm curious, did you meet her when you were young?
I did. So we knew each other. So we've been married for 25 years, 26 years, maybe almost. Yeah. So we kind of ran around with the same group. Met her when I was probably 20 years old, I think. 20.
Oh wow, I didn't know you got
Yeah. So we're very young, and started dating.
That's awesome, though.
Yeah, you don't see it in this industry very often.
No,
right? Like, you don't see
no.
like nobody ever lasts that long. So,
especially people that are both in the industry.
Yeah. I think it worked out good though, because we weren't both athletes, right? Like I did start out as an athlete, but I'm very realistic on what my potential was, and hers, like, she could literally walk into a gym and just like take off. So it became very so I like, dude.
Yeah, but did you have passion? Did you have passion for bodybuilding though? Like
no, dude. I loved bodybuilding. I loved training.
Yeah,
I loved walking in the gym and beating myself up,
just like you do now.
Yeah, exactly. But dude, I hate dieting. Like, dude, I was the worst dieter ever.
I'm the same way. I hate it.
And so I hated it, and dude, you got to be a different breed of human being to do that shit. And like, I would diet for 4 weeks and then go eat every fucking thing under the planet. And you just can't do that, right? And be successful. But it became like, like at the time I was a very much research nerd too. Like, I just dug into that shit because that's what I wanted to learn, all the little things, and taking stuff because bodybuilding, it takes basic stuff, and then you have to alter all of the general stuff to apply to bodybuilding.
Which we're gonna get. I'm gonna ask you so much details about that.
Yeah, and that's what I really like. That's what really interests me. And so I think it's because of that, because we weren't both athletes trying to strive for the same type of, notoriety that became different. Yeah.
Who were you in high school? What guy were you in high school? Like,
dude, I was the kid.
What were you like?
Dude, I was the kid that, and this is one of the things I try to instill in my kids. Like, I was the kid that got along with everyone. Like, honestly, like, I got along with popular kids. Like, I got along with the party kids. Like, I got along with everybody because, like, at the time, like, it seemed like, like, whoever the fuck was going to be the most fun, like, that was who I wanted to run around with. So if the popular kids were having a party that weekend, like, dude, I'm down with that group, right? But like, if like, if the stoners are like throwing a big ass party, like, I'm in, dude, I'm in. So
were you a jock in high school?
At the beginning, like, I started out, and then I became more motocross. Like, dude, I was.
Oh, that's right. You're a motocross. That's
motocross kid. Like, I started out doing stuff, and then, dude, I was just a bad student. Like, I was a kid that, like, got bored really fast with school, and I had ADD, and it's funny. Like, I had ADD, and I kind of knew like something was up, and I'll never forget this. My mom took me to the doctor, and he's like, listen, something's wrong with this kid. Like, he's like, he can't focus, like this and that, da-da-da-da. And my mom walks out, and she's like, well, this is just ridiculous. Like, what kind of a person takes their son to the damn doctor, and the doctor offers to give the medicine to the mom? And so they're gonna give my mom medicine to deal with me, I guess. But
that's hilarious.
But like, I just was not like a great student. Like, I got bored with shit really fast, and so, I went out, for stuff, but I was just more driven for like BMX and motocross. Like, that's what I was like obsessed with. Like, I was obsessed with that shit. Like, every day, every minute, like, that's what I wanted to do. Like, I wanted to be on a bike. I wanted to go fast. I wanted to do something,
Well, there's a crux of an issue that I'm confused by. Number one, you were a cop, but number two, you're famous for your friendship with Mel Chancey. And I really want to talk. I love motorcycle clubs. I'm like a fan of them. I've never had the opportunity to meet one because I grew up abroad and stuff like. Well, we have them there, but they're not. Right. Anyway, so there's two things don't make sense there. I was curious, and the motocross, which is a totally different kind of biking. How did this all mesh together?
So it's kind of interesting. So, of course, Mel is originally from Chicago, from Illinois, too. And then we had a mutual friend, Chuck Sano. So Chuck Sano is a pro bodybuilder. He was an amateur bodybuilder. He's district chairman for Illinois. So I've known Chuck for years. And that's who I ended up first meeting Mel, through. And, of course, like, me and Mel just clicked right away. and when I met Mel, I was not a cop at the time. So we were both kind of at the time probably, considered fucking degenerates at the time. Like, we were all like wild and crazy and just like, nuts at the time. And of course, Mel was, running. Actually, he had just kind of started to phase out of running the Angels. They were trying to, like stick him at that point, trying to,
Rico.
And so it was kind of along those, like that time frame that we all kind of, realized like, hey, maybe we should get our heads out of our ass and, kind of do something a little more professional.
And this was in your early 20s, around the time you were with Kim that you were talking about.
We had just kind of, me and Kim had kind of just started like getting serious at that time.
I have some questions about motorcycle clubs. Number one, is the loyalty aspect that we see in TV with Sons of Anarchy, but before that, just the legendary loyalty of motorcycle clubs that's not there in the mafia, that's not there in gangs.
Right.
Is it real?
It's 100% real. Like when you walk into that, you realize that you're a part of that for the rest of your life. And when you decide to walk away from that, like it's not something that is just done, like especially even like with the Angels and stuff. And again, like I was never an Angel, so I don't know, but me and Mel are very, very tight, and I knew a lot of those guys. They tattoo you with a dead head, and you walk away from that, they take that, they'll cut that dead head right off of you. Like you are dedicating your life to be a part of that. You're basically saying like, listen, you're pledging to that lifestyle forever, and I mean the mafia in a way I think is a little bit like that, but I think where the mafia is a little bit different, there's always a point of like people trying to better themselves within the organization, but the Angels and motorcycle groups aren't like that. It's an earned respect that progresses you through the ranks. You're not ever trying to kill somebody to move up in it because you just aren't allowed to do something like that. The mafia is a little bit different. Like it's like a battle to move up through the ranks. And I think that, motorcycle clubs are just something that, now, I mean, if you look at the stuff now, they've like monetized it tremendously. Like back in the day, like you couldn't wear a fucking Angel shirt, like you couldn't wear colors and stuff like that. But now they've realized like, holy shit, their brand is enormous. Like that brand is huge. And I mean, I don't know what they make, but it's got to be a ridiculous amount of money just off of their branding and stuff that they do. And you've seen them do a lot of positive stuff now too. Like it's not, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's a lot of bad stuff that happens out there, but you see them do a lot of positive stuff too. I mean, even during the riots, you've seen them come together, like groups that you would never dream that would be coming together, protecting things, and they did that. So it's a different, it's a little bit different than it was back in the 90s, where I think there was a little bit more of a battle there
between the different MCs, right?
Yeah, just different, It
was a bit violent then. There were the Las
Vegas. Yeah, I mean, when Mel was running it, like, yeah, they were ruthless. Like, I will say, like, when Mel was running it, and that was at the same time when, like, Zito and, like, I mean, Zito and Mel were probably two of the most brutal clubs, because you're talking New York and you're talking Chicago. And those guys were, I think to this day are still very tight. But like during that time frame, it was a very brutal, like, organization. Like you ran it with a fucking iron fist. If Mel said something, you fucking did it. Like there was no bullshit. Like if Mel put his foot down, it was because there was a reason for it, and it was done,
The lovely thing that I sense though is that they're not a totally profit-driven organization. It's a brotherhood. Before it is now.
100%,
Yeah,
I think that's what I'm saying. Like, that's what I mean. Like, it's not something like when they commit, like they're, they've got everybody's back. I mean, it's 100% brotherhood, and I mean, when you watch, we'll see guys with just, not even at that level of a bike club, but at, some of the, smaller bike clubs, and you see them, and not even bike clubs that are even, let's say, violent or, doing like criminal organization shit, but just, guys that are riding and stuff. That brotherhood is a fucking tight brotherhood. That's a group of guys that really, love bikes. They love each other as far as like the united, thing. I mean, it's what they live for, across the board, so, and the thing that's funny is, if you knew Mel from then, like, so, I mean, dude, there was, there's so many stories about Mel that's like, just like crazy, like, dude, he's a trip, right? But he's the greatest guy. Like, dude, like my kids call him Uncle Mel. Like, like he is that genuine of a human being. Like,
he's an awesome dude.
Dude, he is one of the best guys in the world. Like, he just happened, there was a time in his life where, he just went down a path that was just a very violent and brutal path. But now, that's not really part of his life. Like, the direction that he goes, like, dude, I still see his Instagram stuff, and it's like, all of this very positive stuff, and I'm just like, it just still trips me out sometimes when I see it, and I'm like, yeah, this is a dude that was carrying vice grips around, like pulling people's teeth out of their mouth, talking about like enlightenment and shit. And I'm like, dude, how can you not love that guy?
I always bust his balls about that.
I'm like, dude, that's the friend you want right there, right? That's the guy you want, dude.
Absolutely.
Is the crowd there getting older in the MC club?
Man, I've been so far away from that. Like, the only time I really was like even around that is, really with Chuck, and seen that a little bit with Mel and those guys a little bit. But I think that I think it's older, but I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that there is a new breed that is, probably within that ranks and stuff too. I have no idea. It's hard to say because it's funny. I've seen a couple documentaries on it, but the documentaries are following like the OG guys that were around when Mel and those guys were there. So
yeah, like the guy with the hole in his throat.
Exactly. Yeah. He's one of the originators of it.
Yeah. He's a cool guy. So, and he's actually I think he's on hormones too. I don't know if you ever noticed, but he's
I didn't know. Pretty big. Yeah.
He's muscular at 75. He's very muscular.
He's on TRT.
He's on some of the good TRT. So you said that you weren't how did you get into lifting exactly? You didn't mention.
Man, so it was kind of the same as everybody. Like, I was a skinny kid. Like, I was thin, obviously because I was racing motocross, and if you're big, like, you don't bounce real well when you hit the ground. So you want to be small. And, I started training, same shit. Like, you want to kind of, look bigger, impress people as far as girls and all that nonsense. And then I, met up with a couple guys that were bodybuilders and kind of took me under their wing. And it was one of those things that it was just, like, the part I loved about it was you could go in there at any point in time and the fucking iron was there and it never backed down. You was always able to push yourself mentally and physically across the board. It was that challenge that, like, drew me to it. And no matter if you were shooting for something and you got there, the next challenge was right there. So it was always something that you were trying to move forward. And that's the part that I was just like sucked into, because it was like a never ending, like, movement that you were trying to just keep bettering yourself. How can you do it? And then and then at the time you see these guys, and at the time, like, I was young, right? I didn't know. And you see these guys in the magazine, you're like, holy shit, how is it even possible to look like these guys? Like, how is it possible? And then you start to see just a little bit, and you're like, oh, like, you're just like sucked in.
Yeah.
I sometimes think that people, oh wow, you have a husband?
Malamute.
Oh wow! Are they like more independent a little bit?
He's very very like independent. He's about 230 pounds. So
I have a German Shepherd military police dog from.
Okay.
Germany.
We got a friend that raises like German Shepherd, like Malinois and German Shepherds. Yeah.
Yeah, Malinois are really popular now as well because they're really agile. Yeah, mine has like the highest level of certification. It's called the Schutzhund level 3. Both of his parents have it. All of his grandparents have it. 7 out of 8 great-grandparents have it. Yeah. It's very hard to reach that level. This guy would love nothing more than to please me all day. He's the best. Yeah, just now he's amazing. He adds so much to my life.
Mine, all he wants to do is eat.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Sleep and eat.
And explore. Yeah,
That's it.
I think you touched on something that sometimes doesn't get enough credit, which is that the self-improvement with weightlifting, of facing weights, being able to see yourself gradually, in terms of strength,
Yeah.
gradually improve. And you're facing something that you can wrap your mind around, and you can see it happen, and it teaches you a kind of discipline. What do you think about that?
I think the people that get that right there are the people that fall in love with weightlifting and are successful with it. I think the people that are chasing instant fame and they don't ever learn to love it before they see that is the problem. I think it's the problem that we have today. Yeah. I think you got to fall in love with it first. I think you've got to go into the gym and understand it, and you've got to go through that process to figure out why it is you're doing it. Not because, I mean, granted, there's some guys that are just genetically blessed and they should be competing. But, the guys that, want it now, they want the Instagram fame, they want the social media fame. Those guys just go up and down, up and down, up and down constantly because they never fell in love with it anyway. They're not doing it for the right reasons. They're not walking into the gym on a bad day and realizing that it's not work that they're getting ready to do, but that the gym is actually getting ready to make the day better. That's the part that's so great about it. And I think that those are the keys of being successful in this business for a long period of time. And I think the guys, when you look at like those 90 guys and everybody talks about that era and stuff, I think those guys got into it because of that. Those guys started at a very young age. They learned to love it. They built that foundation. They moved forward way before they became famous in bodybuilding and superstars. They built that relationship with the iron first and then became, basically the superstars that they are in the sport. I think that's the key. I think it's 100% the key in whatever you do, not just weightlifting, but, I told my son who, athletically could probably do whatever he wants. And right now football is it, like it is it. But I told him, I said, the key is you have to love it, because what you have to realize is for whatever amount of time that you have in the day, you have to be obsessed with what you're getting ready to do. Everything, listen, it has to be an obsession that you absolutely love. Because if every day you wake up and you go, oh my God, I've got to eat these meals and then I've got to run and I got to do skill work and I got to do this and I got to do that and da-da-da-da. At some point, you're going to just hate what you do. You're going to just hate it. It will become, even if you're great at it, you're still going to hate it. And I think that that's the key, I think, across the board. It really, especially with when you're talking about weightlifting and stuff, bodybuilding in really, because you're talking about the diet is such a brutal point and a brutal aspect of that industry. Strongmen and everything, those are still crazy sports. But let's get real. I mean, you can eat hot wings and be pretty goddamn happy while you're training and, get those things done, where bodybuilding, there's a certain point and, you can enjoy good foods, but for the majority of the human beings out there, they've got to be very consistent all the time. Just all the time. There's certain things they're never going to be able to do. They're not going to be able to, go out and eat with their friends. They're not going to be able to, do crazy, but we always had friends that wanted us to go horseback riding. And we're like, no, we can't go horseback riding because if Kim falls off a damn horse, she doesn't compete. Yeah, it's over. So it's
and you can't mix
the most random.
Yeah, it's just crazy, right?
Branch Warren fell off a horse, right?
He got thrown off a horse. But you look at Column. He's out there. He's trying to climb up and down a mountain and shit. Blows out his leg and craziness, right? Craziness. And I get that his big appeal is his social media.
But presence. He ruined his career, I believe.
Dude, I believe
now his leg is gone and his biceps fucked up.
Well, he'll never be the same.
He's never the same.
Wait, how did he injure his back?
Callum?
Yeah, he has no back. So
I think that's a genetic.
That's a genetic fuck. Honestly, Chad, I don't think Callum's just reckless. I think he's genuinely a little. He has room temperature IQ. That's what people were telling me.
I said, I think that his problem is that I like Callum. By the way, I think he's smart and he's made the best of what he's done. But I think that he has his flaw is that a lot of people do this. He wasn't, I don't believe, a superior athlete as a kid growing up. And then he became built like he is, and therefore you think now you are a superior athlete. And so you can do all these crazy things. I can climb down a mountain. Of course I can climb down a mountain. Look at me. I can climb down a mountain. And he falls off the mountain. It's like, of course you're going to fall off the mountain, dude. You don't know how to mountain climb. It's like, what are you thinking of? You know, I mean, those are the things that are crazy to me. But I mean, if you look at him, like what he's accomplished is unbelievable. Like with the clothing line and you know, like his appeal to, you know, like, dude, if I'm him, like, I'm not doing those things. Like, dude, I'm literally just taking pictures with chicks and selling t-shirts. Like that's it.
That's cool. Actually, Callum is not a really nice guy, so that's.
Oh, I don't know him, so.
Oh no, he's not a nice guy at all, and that's why I was a little bit harsh there. But no, I really do think it's an IQ thing, because he I don't think he would risk it. I mean, like you said, he thought he could do it.
I think a lot of people do that, though. I think they have this false belief that because they look the way they are, you know, like, I mean, perfect example was the friggin' Jake Paul fight. Like, you have this kid who is an NBA superstar who thinks that he can box. And I'm like, everybody's
that was
like,
a shit show.
Dude, I was telling people this the whole time. I go, this kid's going to get beat to death. And they're like, oh, my God, he's going to destroy Jake Paul. And I'm like, dude, you're an idiot if you think that. Like, this kid is going to get knocked out.
Yes.
I just didn't think he was going to get knocked out that fast.
When he kept running into Jake, I'm like, what is going on?
The minute I saw him, I go, this guy's not even athletic. Like, he knows nothing about boxing.
Nothing. Zero.
You know,
arm wrestle him.
When you talk about athleticism, you know, the only time I really understood what that meant was when I became friends with Scott Mendelson. Scott Mendelson is a guy, I just noticed it by watching him. It's like he's a genius with his body. He knows how to move his muscle. He has a kind of like connection. Whereas I'm like a goof. I don't know how to move. You know, I'm almost like dizzy just walking around. This guy has a kind of connection that I never seen before. It's not just the strength. It's a knowledge of his body and a natural talent.
Ability to do. I think that the people that have that just have it. That's a genetic thing that, you know, and the difference is too, like, I've seen people that are really good athletes and you can explain to them what to do and they can, you know, they'll pick up on it and they'll be good. And then there's those athletes that can literally watch somebody do something and do it. And that's the difference. Like, that's the difference. Yeah.
I call it a physical genius. It's a physical genius. You know, the other thing you mentioned is obsession. And I feel like, you know, in life, even the smartest and most gifted people, they cannot be the best in one thing unless they're completely obsessed with it. You have to be obsessed to the degree where when you're not thinking about something, you're actually thinking of it in the back of your head.
Exactly. I agree. I agree 100%.
It's just always spinning in there. And then the other thing you talked about, which was so important, is loving the process as well as the destination. Yeah. Right? That's what because you were telling your son, like, if you want to be a football star, that's one thing, but you've got to love it so much that you love the process. Yeah. Otherwise,
that's the one thing that and that's the one thing I told him. I'm like, listen, I was like, I don't care what you do, but what I want you to do, whatever it is, I want you to love what you're doing and I want you to commit to it. I don't want you to just half-ass it. I want you to, like, 100%. And it's, I mean, like, he's young too. So, I mean, he's been doing this for several years too. He just turned 14, but like, I've never seen anybody, you know, set his alarm to get up and eat food. Like, I mean, everything with him is literally just precise. Boom, boom. Because he realizes that there's only so much time in the day. I mean, and this is no shit. Like, so the other night he comes and now it's 1 o'clock in the morning. So it's 1 in the morning, right? So we're all getting ready for bed. And he's already done all of his stuff. So we've done training and skill work and all of his stuff. He runs 3 miles a day because we're trying to, like, put on weight, but conditioning too. So he's doing road work. And so he's like, listen, I looked at the weather and it's supposed to snow and possibly rain tomorrow. Like, maybe we should do our sprint work now.
Wow.
And I'm like, I go, dude, it's 1:07 in the morning. And he goes, yeah, I know, but like, it's supposed to start snowing or raining at 8 o'clock in the morning and then rain like the whole day. And I'm like, he's 14. And I go, well, dude, if you want to do it, let's go. He goes, let's go. So we went out, ran, you know, like hundreds and 40s and then 400s for like 45 minutes. And Like they came back in.
God,
Like, I mean,
damn, man.
like there's kids, like very few kids just do that. Like
that's one in a zillion, never.
Yeah.
You know, it
You
just
must be the
happen.
proudest father. I mean, I can't.
It's you know, and the funny thing is, like, a lot of people will be like, oh, you know, like he does all this working out and stuff. Like, what are his grades like? And like, he's literally like one of the smartest kids because he's just obsessed with that. Because he also realizes that if he wants to go to a good college, he has to be able to have good grades. So like he's getting ready to go into high school next year. He was, you know, one of the few that was, you know, like offered to go into the baccalaureate program, the KU program, like all of the high schools, like big programs and stuff. So I thought that was actually as impressive as, you know, the rest of the stuff, because there's a lot of, you know, like really good athletes, but that like being able to balance those two is very
it's a game changer. Yeah, I forgot about it.
I think this is also a testament to the father, because this is
we push. It's mom's good at, you know, it's weird, like we kind of split that. I won't take credit for that because I'm like the worst at like English and stuff, but mom is like really good at that stuff, but I'm like really good at math, so we kind of divide the stuff. But we're both very driven like that. We're both like, you got to get on this, you got to get on this, you got to get on this.
So Chad, how did you end up 300 pounds? So you started lifting. I've seen pictures of you when you were huge. And like you said, I don't think you like to diet too much, but you were massive. How did that process happen? And I'm also curious, because it'll tie into our conversations later. When was the first time you used anabolic steroids? What was it like?
So I'll tell you what, so I met, you know, somebody, I was, like I said, I was thin. I played, like, I was BMX, you know, motocross. I did play like American Legion baseball up until I was about 17. So I was small, thin, probably, I'm gonna guess 160 pounds. So started training. So I trained for like the first year kind of on my own, just kind of really just jacking around, like trying to get used to things. Trained a little bit in my basement, and you know, my mom just kept buying things for me. And then from there we joined the YMCA. Now the YMCA that we joined was actually kind of unique because it was called the Guy Carlton Center. Guy Carlton was the bronze medalist in, I think, the '84 Olympics, in, you know, Olympic lifting. So it was a very like well kind of diverse kind of like gym, because there was power lifters and Olympic lifters and bodybuilders and like all of this like kind of wealth of knowledge down there. So I kind of get in with a group of guys there, and I trained for, so that I would have been probably 18, maybe 17, just getting ready to turn 18. I didn't do anything until I was 20, I think. So I trained for about the first 3 years. Completely clean, and not only really completely clean, like literally just idiotic clean. When I say like no good nutrition, because I was young, I could stay lean pretty easy. So I ate basically like my mom's cooking, which it was old school cooking. So we're talking like fried potatoes and meatloaf, and we're talking like really good food, right? Yeah, we're talking really good food, right? And so, you know, I wasn't doing anything. No protein, no creatine, no nothing. Like, honestly, I didn't have the money to buy it anyway. Even if I would have wanted to use it, like I didn't have the money. And then, you know, we basically, you know, I ended up like training with a guy that was fucking gigantic. And I'm like, dude, what? Just keep like getting bigger, like, you know, and then that was the first point when he kind of introduces me to it. And then from there, you know, I'd obviously done my own research. And that's when I kind of like dealt into the dark side of things.
Were you invested already into the PED world though, mentally, just studying yourself, or no, not yet?
Nothing. No, I was young. So I was about, like I said, about 20 years old.
And it wasn't as common as it is now, right? So people weren't like running around the gym talking about
it. It was common, but it wasn't common to me. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't something that I was that interested in, so I didn't really talk about it that much. It wasn't, I was just, you know, I was like more interested in training. But, you know, like there was this group, like I remember like there was this group of guys that done like mainly bench press contests, and like I would see their bench go from like, you know, a certain point and then just fucking skyrocket. and then it would just kind of drop off, and I'm like, what the hell? And then it would just skyrocket again, and I'm like, how do they like put 80 pounds on their bench in like 3 months? Like, how is that even possible? Like, I've literally been training for 3 years and it's went up 50 pounds. And and that's when I was like, you know, started doing the research, and
hey, like, but you did hit 455 the other day, I think, right?
At 53 years old, dude.
Yeah, that's fucking impressive.
Yeah. It might be the stupidest fucking thing I did.
I'm flat.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Yeah.
With your skull, you're still bench pressing?
Yeah. Yeah.
400 pounds? Are you joking?
Yeah.
How can you possibly?
455.
With a shirt?
Just the one thing. No shirt. No. I didn't even
Are
have
you
elbow wraps on. I did have.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
didn't
I
have
saw
elbow
that.
sleeves on.
That was good.
What
So,
the hell? Are you
it's the one
serious?
thing that I've always been strong on, though. Like when I came into and like started like first working out, like I remember the very first time I went in, I think I benched over 2.25. Like the very first time I walked into the gym.
You're good at close gripping too, though. That you said.
I closed. Dude, I skull crushed like way back when I was big, like 300 pounds. I was doing skull crushers with straight bar 315 for like reps of 10.
Shit.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh my God.
This is a little crazy. I'm shocked.
So like strength was always like through the roof on like
That's
pressing
crazy.
stuff. It was weird. Like I never deadlifted heavy because I was always so scared of like getting hurt.
I remember we had that combo.
Yeah, and that's what I ended up didn't. Then like an idiot like started deadlifting later and then got hurt.
It's coincidental that you notice this with the bench pressers because they're the most notorious for loving anabolics because it adds the most on that list. So those guys are always the hardest core with that stuff, which is pretty interesting. And did you immediately like start training Kim, or was she?
So me and Kim, it's weird. Like me and Kim dated. We're kind of dating at the time. I did a bodybuilding contest and she went with me. And so she had not worked out. She was an aerobics instructor. So very lean, very athletic. And so she goes up there and she's like, oh shit, I could do this. I could easily do this. So I was scheduled to do another show in 2 weeks. And so I'm like, you should just compete just to see what happens. Like she had not even worked out yet. Like she hadn't even started training. Teaching aerobics. This is no shit. She had chocolate cake the Friday night before the show. We didn't even know how to put the suit on. We had the suit upside down. Like literally upside down, right? She had no idea. She ends up getting second, and she's like, hey, hilarious. Like, this actually might be something I could do. I'm like, you think? And so she starts training and never lost another contest until, I think, the Olympia. Yeah.
Incredible.
Turned pro in like 2 years and won the Arnold like 6 months later, and then took I think she got 5th at the Olympia the first year. So.
And this was in women's bodybuilding, right?
Yeah, because that's all it was, men's and women's bodybuilding. Yeah.
What do you think? I mean, just to talk about it now, what do you think about the level of class? Because I get confused being not a bodybuilder. I don't know the difference between like figure and fitness and bikini.
I love the classes because I think it gives a complete, different, choice to what they would do. Because at the time, for Kim, like she took the route with bodybuilding because that's all there was, But in reality, she probably would have went figure because she could have done that very, very, and she ended up competing in figure. She competed in figure 100% natural. She did nothing, like literally nothing. And that's probably the route she would have taken, but I think that it gives people, the opportunity to do what they want to do. I love the figure girls. I love, the women's physique, like Shaniqua and those girls, like their physique, like, because they're genetically just so, like, just unbelievable.
Yeah,
I love,
Shanique's body is insane.
It's just retarded. Like, dude, she posted up a picture and I'm like, dude, that's just crazy retarded genetics. Like, it's just ridiculous.
Crazy.
Yeah. Like, people are like, because I've talked to girls, they're like, what do I got to do to get like that? I go, Dad, there ain't shit you can do to get like that. Nothing.
Reincarnate. We get reincarnated.
You ain't getting like that. Forget it. No chance. If that's your goal, you better pick a different fucking sport. No way.
Unbelievable her genetics.
Yeah. But even the figure, like you look at the top 3, the one girl's actually she won my Missouri State, and she was always just, tiny, just very.
The black
very
girl.
Tiny. Yeah, third. She was third.
Cindy or no?
No, it's
What the hell is her name?
Think of her name. She's from here, but
she's like really petite, right?
Oh my God, her bones are literally like.
Yeah, crazy.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, mind blowing.
And she's just like, you just can't, like, you got to be born like that, But don't get me wrong, she's a hard worker. Like, she's super strong in the gym. Matter of fact, I think she's done some powerlifting meets based off of her weight and stuff, like, Jeez. And but she, she works hard, and but genetically, like, when you look at those girls, like, you just can't just can't get there.
But that's what makes our sport so fucking awesome, though.
Yeah,
that's what I love about bodybuilder, figure, whatever division. Like when those freaks come out, and I'm like, God, like, you just can't build that.
No.
You can't.
And even when you look at some of the classic guys now, you look at the classic, and even those guys now that are, and this is what I love about it. So you look at the guys,
crazy.
Dude, and that's what I love about him and George and those guys. So they started out in classic, but really the sport is set, to progress. And so they started out in classic and they continued to train, and then their body progressed into that next level, which is 212. And who knows, like, dude, Keon could progress into open. He could. There's no doubt. 3 years from now,
George could be in the open, I think.
Yes, yeah. I think he needs to, because his legs need to be bigger
to
match his upper body.
Yeah, sweeps and stuff. Yeah.
Right now they almost look like they're just a little like undeveloped.
Yeah.
Back. Yeah. But he's probably going to progress to that point over the next few years. Keon for sure, because he's young. So
he is a baby. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but that's the part that's so cool about it, is the sport is literally set up like that. And it's got basically everything you want, in it. So, and the draws are still going to be, the men's bodybuilders, because they are such a different level. To do what they do is it's just a unique thing. Like you've got to be just a different human being to be able to do what they do.
Do you think that the 212 class should actually be just like a minimum height, like below 5'8", instead of 212, so they could get as big as they want, the shorter guys, and have?
You mean don't put a weight on it and just put the height on it? I like the weight on it, because I think it forces some of these guys to kind of not take the body to a different level that would kind of blow it out, because some of these guys are like, height wise at a limit, and I think that if they didn't have that weight restriction in there, they would push the envelope, which I think would not be a positive for the sport, in my opinion. I think Flex Lewis having to come down to 212 is what made his physique so beautiful, really, to look at, and so dominant. Now, I think he's going to be a force once he, is completely healed and can walk on stage maybe at 225, 230. I think he can walk on with that same craziness and stuff. But I still think that, if he would have allowed himself to just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, he wouldn't have refined those lines that he has right now. I think that would be that would be the downside of it, probably.
How do you compare prime Lee Priest with prime Flex Lewis?
Dude, I've seen Lee Priest in his prime, and he's every bit as good as Flex Lewis, if not better. Like, that's 100%. Yeah, I know people don't like Lee Priest, but some people don't, because he's outspoken and stuff. But I'm telling you, like, Lee Priest in shape is one of the freakiest bodybuilders you've ever seen. And a in shape Lee Priest would, without a doubt, battle Flex Lewis. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
The gentleman you mentioned earlier who used to bring people over to California, the Edd Connors.
Yeah.
Ed said on RX Muscle that Lee Priest was the freakiest bodybuilder he'd ever seen.
He's not the freakiest bodybuilder I've ever seen, but when you look at him in comparison to how short he is, obviously he's not very tall, and you look at his arms and just the way he looks, it's ridiculous. Like, I mean, his arm, like his overall arm, because I've seen some guys that had some freaky arms, obviously. I mean, Phil Heath has freaky arms, Rolly has freaky arms, but when you saw Lee, like his forearms were like that, like, I mean, everything.
Like a pineapple.
It was ridiculous, like ridiculous. And I mean, that was, they were just more complete. Like, I've seen some freaky shots of, Phil Heath's arms, and they are definitely at the top of the list when you're talking about arms, and the same with Rolly. But when you're talking about overall completeness from top to bottom, I would say that Lee Priest probably had the best arms ever in the history of the sport, in my opinion. Like, I just don't think, when you're talking about like everything, completeness from top to bottom, it would be hard to beat him.
I'll ask you more about Ronnie later, but I wanted to ask you, did you consider that Ronnie had like a harder time with triceps than his amazing biceps?
You know what's weird about his triceps? Yeah, so if you notice, like, his arm was shaped actually very unique, because his tricep actually was so big, yet actually a thin muscle group. So if you actually looked at his arm, his like brachialis or whatever that laid up underneath there was enormous, almost oversized, I think.
Yeah, his brachialis is huge.
It's huge, right? And it's almost longer and bigger than it is supposed to be, because as it rolls up in there and pushes that bicep, it went all the way up. Like it filled his whole arm up, and it basically laid up on top of, or I mean, the rest of the muscle just kind of laid on top of that. And granted, it's supposed to roll under and push the arm up, but his was so big, it literally formed the majority of his arm. And so when you saw his tricep, it wasn't like his tricep was this like massive hanging tricep, but his arm was so freaky looking that it was just unique. But his tricep was actually this kind of thinner tricep with this like humongous like muscle to it. Now it could have been also because there was points where it almost looked like he had this like thin muscle group that like the tricep almost underlie. So it was almost like a double like look to the muscle, you know what I mean? Like there was like two parts to that actual individual tricep. So I don't know, he had the freakiest arms I've ever seen, like when you looked at him, because just the size of them were so crazy, yet you know they were shaped so unique compared to everybody else's arms.
When he flexed, it was like a bicep, and then he had that split, and then like another bicep.
Yeah, the way that bicep
was like growing out of that.
It was ridiculous.
His bicep had a bicep.
When he did like the one arm pose like this, it would just go boom, boom. And I'm like, what the
split? That's what I'm saying. Like it's almost like there was like a muscle and then there was another one sitting on top of it.
Yeah.
Like a deformity or something.
Freaky.
It was ridiculous. But the tricep was like that too, because the tricep was like this massive, like huge area, but then like this
we're connected by a delt too. It was like another extender of I don't even know what the fuck it was. Honestly.
Yeah, it was crazy as shit. Somebody, you know, one of his doctors said that they MRI'd his leg one time, and that they were looking at, because he had a little pain in the knee or something, and that his quad tendon was the size of a pencil.
Wow, interesting.
Not a pencil lead, but the entire pencil. Yes.
Damn.
Like humongous, like a rope. He said,
that's
it was humongous.
Like a fucking cable.
Yeah, that's what they said. Yeah, he said
like when you get the surgery and they put the cable in.
And he said it was like sheltered by bone, so it actually like went in. Like he said, it was like kind of covered.
Like when they screw the tendon through the bone.
Yeah, but he said his was made like that.
It's fucking crazy,
dude.
Okay, I have to ask you so many more questions about it, but I just want to get to your first coaching. Because you started the story with the first time you decided to coach. You're already working as a police officer for a while, and I'm sure you have tons of great stories from that time as well. But so you've got your first client. What was it like? How did you learn from anyone? Because what you were saying was that you were seeing gaps in everyone's
exactly.
game.
I seen gaps everywhere, and it was very obvious to me. And you know, we were friends with everybody. So we were friends with Flex, we were friends with Nasser, because everybody was signed with Weider. So we traveled a lot with these guys through Weider Nutrition. So back during that time, there was a tremendous amount of like guest appearances and stuff like that. So a lot of the athletes would go. So I mean, you know, we would probably travel 25, 30 times, you know, a year. And that was just like Kim traveling. The guys were probably traveling, you know, I think Flex told me he traveled one time 54 times one year. And so, you know, so we were with them, you know, we were with Flex, you know, 20 times a year. We were with Nasser 20 times a year. We were with Paul 15 times a year. So we were with these guys just, you know, a tremendous amount of time. And during that time, we all became friends. And of course, everybody kind of talked about what they were doing and these types of things. And I never really, you know, kind of, you know, really got into it that much. But I kept, you know, just thinking like, man, these guys are missing the boat. Like these guys are really missing the boat. And so it wasn't until realistically the 97 Olympia. And so right before that, I started talking, me and Nasser became really close friends, like really close friends. And I said, listen, dude, you got to let me prep you for the Olympia. And I said, you know, and so we just sat down, we started talking. I said, this is what you're doing, but honestly, this is what you should be doing. like you don't need all of this shit. You don't need this. And you know, it's pretty well documented that Nasser, like, he loved a lot, like he loved high volume because like of gear, because he just felt like it was one of those things, like, you know, you take this and you take this and you add this, and you add this and you add this, and you don't really know what's working and what's not working. So you don't want to pull this out because you don't know if this is working, but you don't want to.
That's how I used to do.
Yeah, that's, you know, that's the way everybody did.
Cover all your bases.
And so, you know, I said, listen, like, let me get you ready for this. And I said, just like, give it one shot, right? And so at the time, so we started, you know, doing things. So we were prepping him, like, kind of going in, and he started like looking really good, like before we actually started the contest portion of it. And so then Paul Dillette's like, comes to me, he's like, hey, I heard you're prepping, you know, Nasser. I just seen him, he looks fucking crazy. He said he hadn't even started a diet yet. And I'm like, yeah. So again, like, me and Paul were really good friends, and he's like, listen, get me ready for the show. And he's like, but you know, I'm like, I don't have a lot of money. It was like during one point where Paul was kind of down on his luck a little bit, and I'm like, listen, like, we can do this, and like, you know, contrary to belief, like, you don't need 16 IUs of this and all of this shit. I go, matter of fact, we can probably do it without G. That's no shit. So I said, I think with your genetics, with where you're at right now, I'm 100% convinced I can get you in the best shape of your life with no G.
Wow.
Because he didn't have any money, right? And so he's like, dude, if you can do that, like, that would be fucking spectacular. Da 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 da. I'm like, I'm 100%. I'm 100%.
You're just basing that off his genetics? That's all you're basing?
With where he was at right there, based
Gotcha.
off of where he was at. And I'd seen him, like, dude, I seen him do literally nothing and literally just respond like a freak of nature.
Jesus
so
Christ.
I knew, like, what I could do with him. I knew that it was going to be a challenge, because I knew there was going to be other aspects that he was not, like, the greatest at, like diet and cardio and some of those things. But I knew that he could do very little and do, like, amazing things. And sure as shit, like, that was the best he ever looked that year, you know. And then from there, you know, at the show, Flex, of course, then came up, because again, me and Flex, and then Flex is like, dude, why didn't you tell me you're prepping these guys? And I'm like, I just kind of started. And then he's like, you know, and they just kind of snowballed from there. And then Flex went into the 98 Arnold, and probably the best that he ever looked.
Yeah.
And then, of course, then Flex calls me about Ronnie, and you know, and originally I talked to Ronnie, and so Ronnie is just kind of laid back, and he's like, I talked to him, and he's like, yeah, I'm kind of thinking about doing this, What do you think? And I'm like, yeah, this, that, da, 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 da. I call Flex. I go, dude, I don't even know if he wants to work with me. I go, he didn't say anything. He's like, what do you mean he didn't say anything? I go, well, he didn't, like, come out and say he wanted me to get him ready for a show or anything. He was just kind of saying he was doing this. He goes, no, that's Ronnie. He goes, he just doesn't do that. He goes, let me call him. He calls him back. So he literally, then Flex went out of his way to call Ronnie back, you know, to talk with
Crazy.
him. And then, and then Ronnie calls me, and he's like, no, I 100% want you to work with me. And I'm like, well, we're in then. Let's go.
What was Ronnie doing up to that time, though? Just himself?
Yeah, just doing everything himself, you know.
Jesus
and I mean,
Christ.
anybody that knew anything about bodybuilding could see, like, glimpses of this guy and be like,
right.
man, this guy could be,
like, this is scary.
out of control. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to ask you more about Ronnie later, but one question right here. So there's always people saying that Ronnie was literally natural, and I understand this as being he was on his own testosterone from his gonads, while competing with Flex at the Europa and all that stuff when they were traveling just before he contacted. Because people say that Flex told him the secret, but I guess the secret was you. They connected you guys.
So I think that he wasn't natural when we got together, but he was natural up into a really, I mean, there was a point where he was definitely natural. So he turned pro natural. I 100% believe that. He competed the first few years, I believe, natural, and then kind of crossed over and then kind of progressed. And, you know, I mean, he was doing, you know, so, but in the big shows that really meant he didn't do, you know, as good. But I mean, I think he might have won. He placed really high in a couple of shows. He may have won Canada one year, you know, and stuff, but he placed 9th the year before at the Olympia before I got him ready. And it was just, you know, like, not putting those things together, like just crossing all the, you know, and dotting all the things. So I think that, but he was a guy that, like, again, like anybody that knows anything about bodybuilding, all you would have to do is look at him and be like, this is a champion just waiting to happen right here.
Yeah.
Like, this is for sure. And he's one, and like everybody's like, who's going to be the next Ronnie? Like, I mean, I'm sure there will be that guy, but I don't know if we're ever going to see Ronnie again. We're going to see a freak for sure. We're going to see
no one's going to be as dominant as him.
No. I don't think we're going to see anybody as big as him. We may see a genetic freak like a Flex Wheeler type physique or something, but you know, that's just genetically like beautiful and in shape and those types of things. But like Ronnie, because here's the thing. You first you got to have the genetics to get there, but then on top of that, you got to literally have the work ethic to get there too, and the mental ability to take yourself to a different level dieting. So you have to outdo him on all of those things, which is, in my opinion, impossible. Yeah. It's impossible.
I don't think in today's day and age that's going to happen either.
No way.
I don't think so.
This is the perfect time for my questions. I have some questions on your clients. Like, who were the most of certain things? So first one is, who gained I'm talking about the top pros, like the people you were just mentioning. Who gained fat the easiest?
King Kamali.
Oh, yeah. I didn't write down my questions about King Kamali.
It wasn't so much fat, but he
cheated,
would diet. Right? He would diet so hard, and then man, he would start pounding, stuff, and it would be like boom. He's like 40 pounds heavier, most of it was water, but man, that dude could eat and he could gain weight fast. But
he's still loyal to bodybuilding.
Yeah. I'll tell you what.
He's bred different. He's bred different.
He
in a good way, obviously.
Yeah.
Not in a bad way.
I'll tell you, I always loved King because he was one of those guys that spoke his mind. He was, he talked the talk, but then also walked the walk. He dieted super hard. Like there would be times I'm be like, dude, you realize we're going to have to lose 60 or 70 pounds, dude. And he's like, no problem. I can do it. You just lead the way. Tell me what I got to do.
He used to go to the gym.
Tell me not to eat, I won't eat.
He lives by me, and he used to go to the same gym as me, and he would come in and train like it was the 98 Arnold all over again. Or Olympia.
Dude.
It's fucking lunatic. He still trains like a lunatic.
Crazy. But I'll tell you, I remember the time he turned pro, and then we went to the Ironman, and dude, that hamstring drop of his, and like that glute.
He looked phenomenal.
Woo. It was crazy. It was crazy. Yeah.
Was he talented for gaining muscle also?
He put on muscle well, yeah. He had, his probably downfall was genetically he didn't have great arms.
Yeah.
And so, that was a little bit of a kick. But, dude, he had good legs. He had, like, his clavicles had to be, like, 4 inches wider than everybody's. So wide, dude. Like, he kept walking in the room. You're like, dude, you like extended clavicles. It was so ridiculous. So, obviously, his lat spread and all that shit was off the it was just crazy. And then the great thing about King was he had this great physique, but he had this great personality too, which is what bodybuilding really is missing right now. Like he had this just craziness to him in a good way, and him like the battles with him and Craig Titus and all of these crazy things is what made the sport fun.
Was Craig Titus gifted, do you think, for bodybuilding? Or is he somebody who pushed himself as far as?
Dude, I think he pushed himself as far as he could go. I don't think he was really gifted at all. But I think he was an athlete that had okay genetics, and was just the mentality that he didn't really care. Like he would push himself no matter what. If it meant like I can tell you, like if there would have been a pill that said, and people you've heard these questions before, like, listen, if you take this, you're going to win the Olympia, but in 5 years you're going to die. He'd have popped the pill instantly, like guaranteed.
I've heard that from people who knew him as well. Apparently, he really liked to take a lot of gear too. He was like famous.
He was big on it. Yeah, he took a lot of gear, and but I think he was just always that guy that was like compulsive, obsessive personality type of guy that no matter what, like it didn't matter, like if you told him, hey, like, just back it off a little bit, like, just do this. Like, you knew, like, even the back off was going to be 3 times what you told him. Like, you just knew. That's just his personality, Oh,
it's funny as hell.
But he did pretty well for the genetics he had. He took 5th at the Arnold one year. And, when you think about, and during
the most competitive time.
Most competitive time in the sport's history. That's a pretty friggin' big accomplishment.
Yeah.
By the way, I mean, obviously this is so speculative, but sometimes I ask people about this. Do you think that Craig Titus was guilty?
Yeah,
So
I do.
speculative. You do think that, huh?
I think he was guilty. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I think what happened. I don't think it was done purposely. I think, in my opinion, is that they, for whatever reason, they got into it with this chick and accidentally killed her, and then tried to hide it, and that was and that's where they did it. You know, if they would have just said, if they'd have just called the police right there and been like, look, this is what happened, da 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 da, they would have been fine. The part that always, you know, like the crazy, but he was on, like, he was admittedly on, you know, like heavy rec drugs at the time, and I don't think he was, you know, thinking real clearly, but you know, I think it's just a sad situation across the board. I will say though, like, I don't know who was involved and whatever, but no matter what, you got to give him credit, because at the end of the day, he took the responsibility and took it, and basically at least gave Kelly her life back, like in time for her to at least live the majority of her life. Because in reality, if Kelly wouldn't have hooked up with him, she probably would have never ended up in that situation. So no matter what, I mean, what he did was, you know, a heinous crime. You've at least got to respect him for the fact that he took it upon himself to plea bargain a deal that saved Kelly. And that's it is what it is, you know.
Yeah,
that's such a good way to put it. You know, the thing about like methamphetamine at high doses, which is, I study the brain a lot, that's my specialty of what I like to research, is that when you have methamphetamine is a dopamine reuptake inhibitor and a transmitter of dopamine. Dopamine at high dose, people think dopamine is like a happy hormone. Dopamine is what makes schizophrenics. High dopamine levels causes psychosis, and people end up doing stuff like, you know, I've heard tons of stories living in LA because we have a huge meth problem, and people end up doing stuff that's totally out of character. Sometimes you go on one night and someone's dead, you know. So it's the thing.
We got a you know what's crazy is we have a huge meth problem here, like in Missouri, like bad, like it's like, I mean, it's unbelievable. If I want to buy sinus pills. So like Allegra D, like, you know, because like during, like now, like, you know, sinuses are bad. I can't buy Allegra D enough for the month.
Will they ask for your license or no?
They'll ask for my license, but I still, because Allegra D has a certain amount of pseudoephedrine in it, I can't buy 30 pills. I can only buy 15 and then like another X amount in like 10 days. But I can't take enough to get me by one pill a day. Because that's how much meth is being sold in this town. It's just ridiculous.
Nuts.
When I was a cop, we busted one meth lab in the whole 5 years that I was a cop. They probably bust 5 meth labs a week here.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have idiots being arrested in bathrooms from like shake and bake meth, like, you know, like fucking everywhere. Shit's everywhere. Crazy.
That's bad.
I've seen that when I visited my family in New Mexico. Like you'll see, even like if you go to like a restaurant, like the chef or whatever will walk out and he'll have, you know, the classic meth thing is the jaw moves.
Oh yeah.
So whenever you see somebody, there's actually a guy on YouTube called Jay Campbell. He does this all the time. I'm like, you had a long history. You'll never see that anywhere else. It's a telltale sign. I used to live in downtown LA. I see it. But we don't have the problem you have with not finding medication because we live right in Mexico.
Dude, I can't even buy lithium batteries here. That's no shit. Lithium batteries locked up.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
You seen the movie with Jennifer Lawrence, Winter's Bone?
No.
The movie Winter's Bone.
I never saw that one.
It's actually a really good movie. It's about like her father is like a meth head. The whole family's basically, you know, trapped in
older
meth. It's an older movie. Yeah, she was younger because she plays like a 16-year-old girl.
Oh, okay. I like drug movies though. I want to watch them.
And so it's all about like this whole like inner workings of you love the show actually. I think she won the Academy Award for it. I think.
Wait, it's a show?
Yeah, I think Jennifer Lawrence did. But so her father basically disappears, and he had been arrested, so they had put the house up on bond. So the bondsman comes, is like, "Where's your dad?" Like, "We're getting ready to take your damn house." So she has to go out and find the dad, and then she realizes the dad's dead, but they got to find it. The ending is, dude, she ends up with his hands.
I just put it in my notes.
Yeah, drops it in on, you know, the cop, and they're like, here's the, you know, here's the thing. Like, they chainsaw it off, and like these old women are like, they're like, well, you got to chainsaw both of them off, or hell, they'll just think you cut one of his arms off to get out of trouble. Dude, it's crazy. But that was filmed like 20 miles from here.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
But is that a thing all across the South? Because a lot of my family's from Alabama. I'm wondering if that...
It's bad there too?
Oh, is it really?
I don't know. Is it?
Yeah. I don't know about the rest of the South.
Yeah.
So one thing I was going to ask you about Kamali, you were mentioning his arms. I noticed that with Middle Eastern bodybuilders, it often tends to be the arms that don't grow as much, whereas they tend to have great shoulder width, I've noticed.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just depends. I mean, I think it's a genetic thing. I mean, it's one of those things where I think genetically, you know, some people end up with big legs, some people end up with big arms, some people end up with big back. You know, you hardly ever see somebody with a big back and big arms, because one of the two is almost always going to dominate the movement. But
yeah,
arms is always like one of those things. And you know, with Kamali, and, you know, there's been a couple guys that, you know, kind of went, you know, like a certain route and kind of screwed their arms up a little bit, basically chasing, you know, 2 inches of fucking, you know, arm size, when in reality they could have left their arms alone and been, you know, just as good with, like.
You mean Jimmy and him up?
Yeah. I'll tell you, I mean, I've told everybody this. I'm like, leave the friggin' arms alone. Like, so your arm's 2 inches smaller, but they look 2 inches bigger because they have more definition. But I think it's more, but I think they become so obsessed with, you know, getting bigger arms, because some guys just have those crazy, crazy arms. And so they feel like that's costing them in, you know, in competition. But in reality, what they did to get their arms bigger is costing them, you know. And I think, you know, a lot of the guys have went down that road a little bit, but, luckily it's kind of back.
A lot of them.
Yeah, it's right. It's funny. Like, I talk to a lot of guys that, you know, that I'm friends with a lot of guys that sell it, and they're like, dude, you would have no idea. Like,
dude,
you know,
it's bad. Yeah. It's bad.
I thought you can usually see it once the line on the bicep gets washed out, because the oil moves down with.
I mean, you know, Nick would be able to answer this too. Like, I think a lot of it's tough right now, because I think a lot of the guys are using just regular gear in like all the muscle groups, and so they're moving it around so much, they're ending up with not real clean muscle. So they're ending up with scar tissue over the outer shell of the muscle, which basically like blurs the detail, especially in bicep, tricep areas. Definitely delts. You can always, I mean, the delts, you end up
smooth.
You end up with like a ridge there too. That medial delt will ridge up so bad.
Really bad. And then you get the unevenness of muscle groups all the time, muscle imbalances, where one side is just so crazy, you know, it's like, what the and then just the right angles of muscle groups is weird too. The triangles and octagons sticking out of their shoulders.
And I think a lot of that's not really, you know, side enhancement, but just
no, I think it's they're I
mean, there's only so many places to put the shit, like, you know.
And
people are trying to stay away from the hips now because they don't want them big ass knots on their hips, which looks ridiculous.
So crazy.
And they're trying to keep their glutes clear, you know, clean. Try to, you know, so they're, you know, they're putting it, you know, everywhere that they can.
For me, my lats were like the place to hide it.
Put it in the lats, and you know, it here's the thing about the lats, it dissipates out of the muscle group fast there too. So you know, so.
What do you think about the rise of the importance of the glute in bodybuilding, which is like the shredded glutes, but also, is it just that is the real reason because of the what it means in terms of fat, or is it actually that there are some judges that want to see big glutes that are shredded?
I think it's conditioning. I think it's a balance of conditioning from top to bottom. And I think when you see a guy who doesn't have, you know, his glutes in, there's usually somewhere else that's a telltale. I mean, there's been some guys that just haven't been able to get, you know, their glutes in, or the skin lays a little bit weird over the glutes, so it doesn't really like suck in to the muscle. You know, there's a little bit, you know, whether they've been bigger at one point or whatever. You see a lot of times with that, if they've been bigger or if they've been really small, and they end up with kind of stretch marks on there, and it kind of detaches from the muscle a little bit like that. You'll see that, and they won't kind of suck into it and stuff. But I think overall, like, it's, you know, people are like, oh, you got to have striated glutes. You don't have to have striated glutes, but if your conditioning is in balance from top to bottom, left to right, your glutes are going to be cross-striated. Now, not everybody's going to have, you know, freaky looking glutes, like, you know, maybe a, you know, Flex Lewis or whatever, but, you know, some people have more of a deeper groove in the glute. They don't have those little fibrous, you know, glutes and stuff. So I think as long as the conditioning is there and it's even, I think it's a positive. You know, and it's just where the level of conditioning has progressed to. In my opinion, I think, there's always going to be genetic flaws, obviously, but.
In terms of the pro bodybuilders that held muscle the best and on the lowest diet, I mean, on the most extreme diets, who couldn't lose muscle? Who could you bring down their calories?
I'll tell you, I mean, like right now I have Ramy, and like Ramy's body is probably the most efficient body I've ever seen in my life. Like I've never seen somebody's body run as efficient as his ever. And so we've been able to, like for the Arnold, we kind of fluctuated his, carbs and stuff, and we went high and low a lot. We really kind of just kept changing him up so his body would constantly just be kind of switching back and forth. So it never really adapted to something. For this one, we dug into it. So we started off that way to kind of get the body going, and then we just kind of slammed it. And we went like really pretty low carbs, and like I just kept digging him deeper and deeper. And there's a point where we probably have went for at least a month for sure under 150 grams of carbs, and his body was still just very consistently down.
That's
very
crazy.
Consistent. And he never looked flat. There was one point where I looked at him and I thought, holy shit, like you actually look a little flat to me, right? But like to the general public, he's still over 300 pounds. Like he's not going to look flat.
And
I can tell
so his weight wasn't down either, even though he was flat?
He was coming down, but I mean, he was still over 300 pounds.
That's fucking
like, I don't know what it would take like to get him, because you got to realize his body is efficient at everything.
Everything.
So, we're talking calories, we're talking gear, we're talking everything. It's efficient on every aspect. So, that was the thing, that we learned at the Arnold is that, he's 300 pounds. And so I've dieted a ton of 300-pound guys, Ronnie, Gunther, Dillett. Like I've had a bundle of guys. They all needed X amount of carbs. Like they all did. Now I knew like Ramy was going to be a little bit sensitive in those areas. So I literally went in with the game plan of like doing kind of a very moderate carb load. His body just is like, just sucked up everything. But the thing that was crazy about it, it would just run on that. Like it literally took 4 days just to kind of even see a change in the body from it. Like it was idiotic. And that was like, like I told you, I watched him do just 10 up and down, like just squat.
I told Leo about that.
His fucking leg just exploded because that glycogen was still just sitting there. And it just.
This is backstage, Leo.
Backstage. Yeah. So it's just, and he's literally just pumping up, holding on to a bar, just pumping up with body weight. And I literally watched his leg just blow up. And I'm just like, what the hell? Now, granted, a lot of that's because of the carb load and that glycogen just sitting there and stuff, But, I mean, it was just like the way the body responded was like nothing I had ever seen in my life. And so his body would respond on that. And I think it would probably adapt to anything. Like, I think, but I will say, like, we took him to a point where he was smashed this time. Like he had, I can tell you, he's dieted harder for the Olympia this year than he's ever been before. He said this is the hardest thing he's ever done. He never ever felt like this ever in his life. Like he's put in the work. There's no doubt.
That's awesome.
That's so exciting to hear. Some interesting thing that I heard some other bodybuilders like the Boston Mass, the 212
Jose.
on his podcast, they were talking about how it's interesting right now that there are two Egyptian bodybuilders with incredible quads. There's of course Ramy, and there's another gentleman who competed at New York Pro in Florida recently. Huge legs.
Huge, yeah.
So they were commenting on this interesting phenomenon of Egyptian bodybuilders being so good, and you don't see like people from my country, United Arab Emirates or Saudi Arabia, being at the top of the ranks. So the reason being is that some people don't know Egypt is a lot like Egypt had slavery for 400 years. That was one of the most unusual slaveries in the history of the world, which is that the actual Egyptians, they were getting slaves from Eastern Europe. These were Egyptian Arabs. They're already mixed now between Arabs and original Egyptians, who are the Pharaoh's descendants. They're Coptic Egyptians mixed together. And then there's this Eastern European blood coming in all the time. And they're picking these guys by the strongest people they can get out of Eastern Europe. And the weirdest thing I've ever seen in history happened. The slaves actually started ruling the society. And it became called the Mamluk Empire. And Mamluk in Arabic means owned. So it was the slave empire, and the slaves would actually rule the society, and they would, like, the ruler of the society would be owned by somebody, which is the weirdest thing on earth. But he would be ruling the society. So all the top generals, all the top people in the government were all actually slaves. And so in the long term, over 400 years, this brought in incredible genetics into Egypt, from the toughest people from Eastern Europe, the toughest Slavic, Balkan people. All those people came over and mixed with. And what I notice is that when genetics mix, you get interesting SNPs or different mutations from different cultures. And if they come around just right, you get those people like Phil Heath, for example, being mixed African and white. Unbelievable genetics. Oftentimes it's with the mixed genetics.
Yeah, it's interesting. What time frame would that be?
That was between like around the 1500 to 1800 or 1400 to 1800, right after the Fatimid Empire in Egypt. It was one of the most fascinating things in history. I'm surprised more people don't know about it.
Yeah, because it's funny because you talk about that, but if you look at a lot of the like the Egyptian writings, the hieroglyphics or whatever, and all the stuff and everything, the thing that I always thought was kind of unique about that was the fact that there was a dramatic height difference between the drawings, and you always wondered if that was a realistic drawing of what the people in that time frame, because when they open up most of the tombs and all that stuff, those people are very small, right? They're very, very small. Like King Tut was tiny, but I mean, he was a young kid, but he was small. He was like 5'4" or 5'2" or something. Like, he was very, very short and small.
Right. That one they just found not recently, that was very small too.
Small too, yeah. But when you look at the drawings on the thing, I always thought it was crazy because I guess the guards and all of these people were humongous human beings, like way taller than everybody. And you just wondered, because most of the stuff that they drew was very realistic and lifelike. So you just wonder if that was real or not.
I can tell you a little bit about that. Before I do, I want to just give one piece of information. So in the Pharaoh's times, there were people living in Egypt who were light-skinned people, just like they were in the drawings, but they were North Africans. These people are not related to Arabs. What happened was that when the Arab expansion happened, the Muslim expansion in 600, a guy named, I'm forgetting his name right now, but very famous Muslim general, took over Egypt. They came in, the Arab Bedouins were tiny people, small people from the desert, came in, vicious people. They were the Mongols before the Mongols came, and just took over this empire and took over what were at the time pharaohs, descendants of pharaohs, those people that had mixed with Greeks and Romans, because they've been ruled by Greeks and Romans for the last 600-700 years. So they're already mixed, and they're Christian. Okay, they're Christian and they're mixed. And then the Arabs come. So now you've got the Romans, the Greeks, the Pharaoh people, and then the Arabs all mixing together. Now, interesting thing is, in Egypt, there are still people who have no Arab blood. They're Coptic Christians. They've never mixed with Arabs, because all of the Arabs that came to Egypt were Muslims, and all their descendants would be Muslims. Arab Muslims are very adamant about this. So if anyone is still Christian to now, they're actually pure Pharaoh mixed with Greek, mixed with all that stuff in the history without Arab blood. Now, what you're talking about is very fascinating also. One thing I want to mention is with the Neolithic expansion, which was the expansion of farming that came from the Middle East, we shortened the whole world. Because when this came to the West, the protein in the diet just totally shot down. So you see average heights before the Neolithic expansion in Europe at 6 feet. But the average height 200 years ago was 5'8". And so everyone, and the other thing that you're mentioning, which is very interesting, which is the guards. So what many people don't know is just south of Egypt, I'm not sure if it's South Sudan. I think it's South Sudan, but I'm not completely sure. There are a group of people, I think they're called the Nubians, but there's another group that I'm forgetting the name of. They're the tallest people in the world. They're darker skinned, but they're not Bantus. So sub-Saharan Africa are Bantu people. They look somewhat similar. They're very muscular, usually shorter. The Nubians are taller, skinnier. If you look at South Sudanese, you'll notice very tall people. And they're some of the tallest people in the world. So that could have been part of it also. It's all a melting pot of different.
Crazy.
It's unique though. It's unique because when you look at that, I always thought it was just crazy because none of the, the kings and the people that were literally buried in the tombs that they find are ever big. And it's weird too, because they buried a lot of the children and those with with the families and stuff there, and most of them had like multiple kids that were buried with them at the times. And so because I believe that there was even points where the father, if the parents would die, they would literally kill the children and bury them in the tombs with them so they could be with them in the afterlife, I believe. If you may know more about that than me, because they found multiple tombs with 8 and 9 kids that they believe that were like murdered or suicide or whatever after the things. But it was weird to me that the people that were in the tombs, the leaders and the rulers and stuff, were all very small. But when you look at all of the the renderings of what was in reality, like everybody was like humongous. So it's kind of crazy.
If it was everybody, I don't know what's going on, but I do know that I'm not very into ancient Egyptian history.
Yeah.
A lot of people are very obsessed with it. I'm not into it. But the interesting thing about it was that these people like to enslave other races. So they enslaved the Jews. So they may have enslaved the Southern Nubian.
Yeah.
And even now in Egypt, it's there's a word I forgot in Arabic for Southern Egyptians, Sa'ida. If anyone's Egyptian listening to this, Saidi, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. There are Southern Egyptians, different culture than the Northern Egyptians. It's very interesting stuff.
Interesting.
Who was the most disciplined pro that you had?
Ronnie, without a doubt.
Real.
100%. So Ronnie was one of those guys that literally never altered anything. Nothing. And and this is how I knew this was the way it was going to be for his entire career. So the very first year, and you got to remember, so I'm used to dieting, Flex, and Nasser was pretty good. He was pretty regimented too, but Flex, wasn't the greatest dieter in the world. Like he would do. I will say this: Flex had the ability to suffer more than any human alive. Like he would just starve himself. But at the end of the starvation point, he would want like Carl's Jr. burger. But but he would do it. Like he would suffer to get there. Like it was, or he may go off the rails and then just go to nothing. Like it was, instead of just kind of, going more even. And so you're not having to go to an extreme or not. But Ronnie, after the first Olympia, we were sitting at the banquet and we we're just talking, and I said, hey, listen, man, just from my own knowledge, not that it matters now, you won, but I said, how many times you think you cheated on the diet? And if you did, when was it? And, what was it? He looked at me like I was nuts. And he's like, yeah, that never even crossed my mind. And at that point, I knew okay, this guy is way something different here. This is something completely different. Yeah. He never altered. Training wise, I could be listen, I need more out of you. I said, this is where we're at. And I said, I need you to keep your strength there, but I need more reps out of you. I need more calorie burn during training. So I need you to step it up. No problem. It was never even an issue. Not an issue at all. And at the time, he could do cardio and it was just never I don't think it ever entered his mind. That just wasn't part of it. You know what I mean? He knew that he had to do it. It's what he had to do to win. I remember the first time he came here, we have this place called Andy's Frozen Custard. It's kind of famous around here. It's the best custard
I love custard
ever, dude.
Oh,
and so I'm like, yeah, we'll have to take you by and get you some Andy's custard, because he was guest posting for me. He's like, what's that? And I'm like, it's like ice cream. He goes, yeah, I don't eat ice cream. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, seriously? And he's like, yeah, never. He goes, I couldn't tell you when the last time I had ice cream was.
Man.
So I had my buddy who is an ex-cop who I had take, he was head of my security. He's the one that took all the athletes around. He was the only person I ever trusted with Ken McCroskey. I said, dude, you got to take him to Andy's. I said, get him an Ozark turtle, which is layers of custard, hot fudge, custard, hot caramel, man. And there's homemade pecans and all this stuff, right? So he gets him this, and he calls me, he goes, hey, dude, we're headed back to Andy's. I said, what do you mean you're headed back to Andy's? Yeah, we made it about 2 blocks. That thing didn't last long. He wants another one. And, but he didn't eat anything. Like,
you know what I never asked you, Chad? Did you have to do cardio with him, or he just burned?
He did a lot of cardio. Yeah.
Really?
We kept his food though intake relatively,
I can't picture that man doing cardio for some
2
reason.
hours, like at the high point, 60 in the morning,
Stop.
60 at night, on the step mill.
On top of training every day?
On top of training, yeah.
Holy shit.
Chad, can you explain something to me? I don't understand this fully. Like so say, for example, you want Ronnie to do 2 hours of cardio that day. Why don't you just cut down the carbs? Or cut down the calories?
So here's the thing. So when you're that big, some of the guys we can do that with. Some guys we have to. But there's a point where we can keep the food high, which keeps the body fed. So we now have storage everywhere. Even though we're tapping it with the cardio, we're burning fat, burning calories, but we're tapping into those like deep layers of fat, burning up everything. But the flip side of that is, now could we do that with less, with less calories, less carbs, and less cardio? Yes, we could, but you're also eating less. So what is the benefit there? And so when you're 300 pounds, it's a hell of a lot easier to do a little bit more cardio and be able to eat a hell of a lot more food, because mentally you can just get more done. You have a higher, you're always going to store at a higher rate. Even though you're burning, you're still, not ever depleting the body to a deficit. So you're constantly replenishing at a higher rate. So you got your calories higher, you got your carbohydrates higher. I kept his protein high just for the simple fact that he, had so much muscle on his body. So we would fluctuate usually between 450 and 500. Most people, I don't take the protein that high because they just don't need it. But he had so much muscle. And again, he ate so much food that it was just easier to keep his food continuously higher. And again, there's some guys that I will hey, they can't do cardio. So, okay, we'll go the opposite direction. We'll drop your carbs a little bit lower. We'll keep your storages a little bit lower, and we won't have to dig as much, as far as like cardio and stuff goes.
What I'm curious about is two things. Number one, does the high, especially protein intake, but the high food intake in general, have some kind of signaling to the body to spare the muscle?
Absolutely.
Even with the cardio, as opposed to lowering it down?
Yep.
And then
go ahead.
No.
The main thing is because you're constantly replenishing it. So even though the cardio is constantly burning, and even though you're training and breaking down at a high rate, your body is continuously basically replenishing it. So at no point do you ever have a deficit. Now, this is kind of where things get tricky, because a lot of people think the body will not store protein. I believe the body will store protein to an extent, to be utilized as the body gets used to it, as it carries on. But again, if you're getting that every 2.5 hours or whatever, continuously with chicken, red meat, and here's the funny thing, like a lot of guys will throw in fillers like fibrous carbs and stuff like that, some greens and this and that. We didn't use them ever, because the one thing, it was just taking up space. It was a useless carbohydrate. So we would basically stick with all complex carbs, very clean. Didn't do any fish with Ronnie. Mainly because he didn't like fish, and we never really had to go to that point where we needed that fast of a protein. So we would usually stick with steak, chicken, baked potato. He ate grits every morning. It was kind of a basic thing. But again, we were doing a lot of cardio, but at no point were we going to a point where the body was going to get into a deficit. We were constantly, because we knew that we needed it after cardio. We needed to replenish the body. Then he was going to go into the gym, and we knew that calorie burn in the gym was probably going to be greater than the cardio. So we knew that calorie burn was going to be greater. So we usually didn't train for at least a couple meals, because we knew we had to get that within the system to sustain the training. And then again, we had to come right back and continuously, basically feed the body. And there was a lot of points where I would take and, kind of manipulate his, carbs based off of what he was doing, where he was at, and there might be times when we would have to build as the day went on, with cardio, with the carbs, bleeding into, and then kind of back off maybe a little bit. We literally fine-tuned his stuff day to day,
There's also probably an element of reorganization that happens when you're feeding all those nutrients and the body's sort of getting these different signals to lose fat, but to have those nutrients to grow or keep muscle, where maybe you're reorganizing some energy. But also you mentioned this protein stores, which I think is, you know, people who say the body doesn't store protein are actually weak-minded people. The reason why is because when your body almost always needs some kind of skin, some kind of connective tissue, some kind of tendon, some kind of something.
Yeah.
So unless you're killing yourself with protein that you don't need at all, your body puts it somewhere, and then it can take it off there. It's called autophagy, if no one's ever heard of it, and put it somewhere else. Right. And if you're signaling constantly with those heavyweight exercises, if you put it somewhere else, it'll put it back to the muscle.
Break it down and take it. Exactly. And so that's what I think. And that was where we always tried to stay on top of it, because you got to realize, like, Ronnie had more muscle than anybody. So it would have been really easy to, like, just constantly dig deep, and the body just kind of strip itself. Mm-hmm. So we made sure that, you know, we basically ate on a very regimented. And again, this is where Ronnie comes, you know, to just that fine tuning stuff. There will be guys that, you know, they know they have to eat, you know, every X amount, you know, every 2.5 hours or whatever. But do they literally eat every 2.5 hours? Like, you know, on the clock? Because there is a big difference of your body getting it at exactly that time perfectly every single day versus, oh, I missed that one by 45 minutes. And the next one I kind of backed up, so I kind of shortened it trying to make up time. And then now I'm full and bloated, so I'm going to skip a little bit on here. And so the body's constantly up and down, versus that regimented cycle that the body literally gets used to, and it can just function, again, at such an efficient rate. It can basically never get behind. It can never get, and it also, I think, gets very accustomed to utilizing what it needs. So it's at no point, you know, we're burning up, but at no point is it ever try to shut down, because all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, we're not getting anything.
Well, that's
we're getting ready to starve ourselves, right? We got to shut down. We got to store this shit. We got to shut this metabolism down. At no point do we do that, because it's just like clockwork. You know, that was where Ronnie separated himself from everyone. You know what I mean?
Because once you skip that meal, what happens is your body turns on AMP kinase, which is a nutrient sensing pathway. It senses your low nutrients. It stops all growth, which also means all preservation of muscle. Exact. And
I think this is, you know, who's notorious for this is women. So this is where I think a lot of the women mess things up, because women will stretch shit out. And then you've got so many coaches that don't get the progress that they want from them, right? I've had so many women lately, and they're like, listen, I'm starving myself and I'm literally gaining weight. And my coach thinks I'm cheating, you know, and I'm like, tell me what you've been doing. And, you know, they've literally been eating, you know, 50 grams of carbs for the last 6 months. And
apples,
I'm like,
and nuts.
Now your body already realizes that you're basically, you know, starving it. So like, listen, and this is one of the things that, you know, I tried to explain to somebody. I said, if you, let's say you're eating 2,000 calories a day. I said, because your body is the smartest thing around. Like, listen, your body is much smarter than you think. It's smarter than we are. We aren't going to outsmart your body. Okay. So if you're eating 2,000 grams or 2,000 calories a day, and it's broken up evenly through protein and carbs, whatever, and you're doing that in 6 meals, okay? If you think that you can't maintain what you have by going to that same calorie intake and eating 2 meals, you're an idiot, because your body will figure out 100% how to do it. It may have to change how the metabolism functions, but it will basically stay right there. It can function at the exact same rate 100%. On 2 meals at that calorie intake than it can at 5 meals at that calorie intake. And that's what I, you know, try to keep explaining to people. Like, the body will function the way it has to. And if you starve it, it will know you're starving it, and it will figure out a way to survive. And that's what I think women are notorious for this. Not women, but the coaches are notorious for, like, starving all the time, instead of feeding.
And then dumping cardio on top of that.
Yes.
And T3. And everything else.
and what happens when you starve the body is, specifically, it switches more to burning visceral fat than subcutaneous fat, which is also a problem for them, because it wants the subcutaneous, because that's the most protective fat to have, right? Who was the closest bodybuilder that you trained to you personally?
Closest friend?
Yeah.
Obviously, Kim was the closest to me, my wife. So she's going to be the closest. But the person that I became the best friends with, I would say two. I would say Nasser El Sonbaty. So me and Nasser were very, very close. Talked probably
a lot about him. Yeah.
Yeah. We were very close friends. Talked daily. Wow. And Tom Prince, probably. Me and Tom Prince were extremely, extremely close. We talked daily, like, you know, and a lot of it, you know, I mean, we talk a little bit about bodybuilding, but most of it was just bullshit, you know, like, dude, what did you do today type of shit, friend shit. Yeah.
Who was your most loyal client to you?
Ronnie, without a doubt, I think. You know, Ronnie, you know, we started together and we ended together, and, you know, there was, you know, points where, you know, I mean, you know, like the year that he lost to Gunther was my athlete, you know. But I think, you know, the thing that Ronnie, you know, he respected that. Like, you know, that year wasn't a great year for Ronnie. He won the Olympia, but we had some issues. We had some loading issues. At that point, he was really starting to get big. We were trying to force feed him. We ended up with distension issues with his stomach. Like, we had to, you know, we just, you know, we had to reevaluate everything. And Gunther came on and was just like, you know, it was a unique look. Crowd loved him. He had momentum coming into that year. Then he goes into the GNC and wins. You know, a lot of people could have been like, listen, man, like, I think I'm going to go do something else, you know, but me and Ronnie talked, we were, you know, that close. And I said, listen, we got to reevaluate shit. Like, we got to do something different, and we got to use this as a tool to get better at. And he agreed. And I said, listen, I want to change everything that we have done up until this point. So everything that we thought worked up until this point, I'm going to change. I'm going to change it. Most people would have been like, hell no, I'm not, no way. Like, we're not doing that. That's too risky. I said, this is what we're going to do. He rolled with it, and then, of course, the rest is history, because the final, that next year was 2003, which we'll never see anything like ever again. So, but I definitely the loyalist.
What were you changing, if I might ask, generally?
So we changed everything. Like, we changed gear. We changed, you know, like, we changed everything. Yeah. We changed, you know, like the food timing. We went, like, carb loading process became completely different, because we were using a lot of complex carbs on top of simple sugars. We went to a very, like, high molecular starch that we created so that we could get a tremendous amount of carbs in his system, but a very dense load in the stomach, so it didn't create gas, it didn't induce water. It was very clean through the gut, so we didn't have any distension issues that year. But we were literally able to go up into the, like, 2,000 range of carbs that year with no issues. Yeah, he walked on stage at 287 pounds and just ridiculous.
How much of that was from his barbecue sauce?
Dude, he ate some barbecue sauce. Let me tell you, man.
Did you account for it?
I did. So everybody's like, dude, you know.
Everyone's saying that. Yeah,
so absolutely. So I knew how much barbecue sauce, and I would just basically account for X amount of condiments based off of the carbohydrate sugar count within the barbecue sauce, and it would just be, you know, and I would just rotate based off of that. So if I knew he was going to use X amount of barbecue sauce, I would, you know, and I wanted to drop his carbs, I wouldn't drop his barbecue sauce. I would leave it in, and I would cut it from somewhere else, because it was the barbecue sauce that was allowing him to get everything down. It's what, you know, made the diet, you know, more normal to him. So
and he definitely used it as much as, did he use it as much as everyone thinks he did?
Yeah, he used it. He used it on every meal, you know.
Okay.
Which brand was it?
KC Masterpiece.
That's so cool.
Yeah. But, you know, most people, you know, can't get away with that. I mean, they don't have the type of muscle, they don't have the type of metabolism, they don't have the type of work ethic. But yeah, but it was definitely factored into the total carbohydrates and calories based off of his entire
grown
daily
men now in our sport are afraid of ketchup and mustard, Chad.
Exactly.
Like,
everybody's like,
I mean, do you know what you're pumping in your body right now? You're worried about ketchup?
I just had a national guy, and he's like, okay, so we've got this mustard in. Do you think I can leave that in? I'm like, yes, yes, you can.
Was that Brent? Brent's anal. Brent's anal.
Yeah, keep dipping that shit in that mustard, dude. I said, trust me, I got.
I cut it out now. It's 3 weeks from the show.
You're gonna be good, bro. Brent's a great dude, man.
Brent's awesome. Brent's a good guy.
He's the thing that he's the typical guy like I love, because when he came to me, and I've known him, he's actually from Decatur, so he's from my hometown.
Shit, I didn't know that.
So so there's a bond there, and he came to me and he's like, Chad, listen, man, what do you think I should do? He's like, like I've had so many people tell me, like, genetically, like I'm never going to turn pro, right? And I'm like, who are these fucking idiots that are telling you this? Like, and they're like, well, this because I don't have like the smallest.
They pick them apart,
this, right? And I go, look, dude, I said, what do you think you should do? And he said, well, this is what everybody's telling me. He's like, we got to get your waist smaller. And I go, how are we going to do that? How the fuck are we going to make your waist smaller?
What do you mean the waist belts don't work?
I go, I'm going to tell you what we're going to do. We're going to leave your waist alone. Yeah. And we're going to make everything else bigger. And everybody's going to think your waist is 2 inches smaller.
Yeah, exactly.
So we brought him in 30 pounds heavier, and he looked like a completely different bodybuilder.
He looked awesome, by the way.
Dude, and I'm like, dude, you look like a pro. You look like a fucking pro, so you can tell everybody that told you you were a pro.
He's got a fuck ton of muscle anyway.
Yourself. Dude, he's humongous. But I'm like, anybody that looks at a guy like that and is like, dude, you can't ever turn pro is a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
Like an idiot.
Totally fucking idiot. Yeah.
You know what's going to be scary is when I was 14, I was into lifting and stuff like that. When this generation of 14-year-olds realizes that if they wear waist trainers at that age, there's going to be a lot of Keons actually.
Yeah.
At that age, you can actually
you can actually adjust those bottom ribs and keep them in place.
Exactly. But they haven't realized it yet. I don't know why. I know they're watching, but they haven't realized. So the last one, the least use of his potential in terms of like the most potential in terms of what he actually accomplished. Not a bad thing. It's a compliment.
Chris Cormier. 100% Chris Cormier. Wow. I'm telling you, like, Chris Cormier done just what he had to. Genetic freak, like, but Chris was Chris. Like, here's the thing. Like, I say that, like, if Chris would have had Ronnie's dedication and work ethic and all these types of things, I'm telling you, he'd have won an Arnold umpteen times, maybe a Mr. Olympia. But the difference is, I don't know if he could have functioned that way, because the great thing about Chris was, like, his normalcy to bodybuilding was his unnormal life outside of bodybuilding, I think. And so that's what balanced the two, his partying and strip clubs and all these kind of crazy things. Like, like he was the one guy, like, okay, so there was one time I had 12 guys at the Olympia, or 12 athletes at the Olympia. And I'm thinking, like, man, everybody's a dream. And then there's Chris, and I'm like literally chasing him down at, 3 o'clock in the morning. Like, where are you, dude? Where are you at? Like, how are you not in your room at 3 in the morning? And, he's like, well, me and my buddy went out to a club, and I'm like, like, are you shitting me? Like, we got a show in 12 hours. And, but I mean, he just was one of those guys, and people that, that ever seen him train, like when he was younger and stuff, dude, he was crazy strong. Like, I remember seeing him like incline, like 500 on the incline for reps, and just idiotic stuff.
Yeah, he was stupid strong.
Just stupid strong. But genetically, he just never, like, in my opinion, like tapped into completely. Flex is another one. I mean, Flex was, I think the 98, Arnold was possibly one of the best bodybuilders to ever step on stage. It was definitely one of genetically prettiest physiques to ever step on stage. But there was points where you could look at Flex and go, like, if he would have had just that, ability to just be a machine, to just do nothing else, to eat and drink, like, what would have genetically he looked like? Like, it would have been just something, because he was already, like, he already looked like a freak of nature. I mean, he already looked just like unattainable. But you have to think that there was the potential for him to look completely unattainable. Like, you know, everybody says he looked like a cartoon, but he could have looked beyond cartoonish, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, the thing is, so what would Chris have looked like, do you think? If he, what I mean, because to me, he looks like a complete bodybuilder, even size, everything, conditioning. What would he have looked like, do you think?
20% better. 20% better both directions.
I think
Size,
conditioning, definitely.
Conditioning, yeah.
Definitely.
Conditioning and size. Yeah, I think he would have had 20% more of everything, which
And
would have really separated him from a lot of people. Because he was really close to beating Jay Cutler a couple times.
You think he would have had it?
I think he would have.
I think
like
Jay
he was
too good.
You know what I mean? Like he almost beat Jay a couple times at the Arnold.
Yeah,
there was a couple times like he
almost
could
have went either way.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, Jay, I had no problem with Jay winning, but like,
no, it's just.
But Cormier with 20% more, lights out, game over. You know.
Yeah.
Well, do you think flex will always be the sultan of symmetry with people like Keon coming out that have waists that are like negative in size?
Yeah, because flex is taller a little bit. I think that, you know, that height separates them. I think Keon, his balance from top to bottom, you know, front to back, everything is beautiful, just beautiful. But it doesn't matter. Like you can have that, and then you stand that next to Flex, who, you know, has that tiny waist, and so his quad is going to look more flared. His shoulder to waist ratio is going to look that much more exaggerated. It just looks different on a taller person. And you know, I've seen a couple classic guys that are really tall.
Yeah.
That you look at and go, holy shit, like if these guys ever filled out, they would look just insane. There's an English guy. He's got kind of like short dreads. I don't know if you've seen that guy. He's a classic physique guy. I just seen a picture of him the other day. He may be a pro.
Is he doing the Olympia?
He might be doing the Olympia. I don't know. He's I don't follow those guys like.
There's a couple black. I'm not saying there's a couple black guys that I think are doing the Olympia this year that I saw. I mean, I think they're pretty sure they're doing the Olympia. They have to be. They're amazing. And I'm like, who the fuck are these?
This guy's got like kind of short dreads. He genetically, like, he's probably one of the best physiques I've ever seen in my life. But he's not super big, but he might be 6'1", 6'2". Like,
muscle bellies are just insane.
Oh, it's insane. And you think like, man, this guy puts 50 pounds on. He is literally like a fucking next level athlete.
Have you noticed that on these guys with the smaller waists, when they grow, their abs have been splitting more and more,
separate a little bit. So
do you think that's ever going to get dangerous? And like,
I mean, definitely. So I think that's what ended up happening to Phil. So I think what ended up happening to Phil is, you know, Phil just kept getting bigger and bigger. Everybody, you know, is talking about like, oh, he has a distended stomach and everything. I don't think it had anything to do with him having a distended stomach. I think what ended up happening was, and a lot of athletes are like this. So you basically have your abdominal wall, but then there's also another layer of muscle that lays underneath that abdominal wall, which bodybuilders never train. Okay. Never. They just keep training their abs. They keep training their abs. And what ends up happening is you end up with an imbalance there. And I think what ends up happening is they keep putting on size, and then it just keeps pushing out. And especially the heavy training, a lot of bent over rows and those things, even with a belt, you end up pushing that upper gut out. And if you can't control that and really lock that in, like a lot of power lifters who train for that style of lifting both of those core movements, both of those like plates, you end up with basically that abdominal wall pushing through that split. And I've seen a bunch of guys, you know, with hernias, but I've seen a bunch of guys that will start to have like that ridge that comes down the center point of their abs. And I think that's what ended up happening to Phil, is that just kind of like ripped through that point through. And that's what he had to kind of have, you know, fixed. But there's been a lot of guys that do that. But I think a lot of it is just, you know, not because they genetically have good abs. So it's not something that they have to continuously do, but what they're doing is they're mistraining a lot of the core part that ties everything. So that whole chain they're missing. They're just training the visual part of the ab. And so I think that's where a lot of that like, you know, injury and stuff comes from the midsection.
Too many guys do not know how to breathe properly when training with weights.
Yeah.
They don't know how to inhale, exhale properly, and they're all over the place.
They all breathe out of their stomach.
They're not breathing through their chest,
up high.
Diaphragm. Yeah, they're not. I mean, it's like number one thing I try to teach guys all the time, especially when posing. I mean, it's everything,
and it's tough too. It's tough.
Oh, it's extremely hard. Yeah,
because you're used to. If you're a stomach breather, man, to change that process, man, is really difficult.
It took me years to finally get it. Years, you know. Yeah. So. But Dallas started to get. Sorry, Leo. Dallas had it bad at the end.
He started to separate that center part of the abdominal wall too, and again, it was a lot of heavy training. Yeah. He was, when you're pulling 800 pounds and, doing the type of weight training that he's doing, it doesn't matter if you have a belt on, continuously. Like you're gonna blow that part out a little bit, and the more you kind of do that, and again, like power lifters train that whole like chain. Yeah. So when they lock that in, like that's why you'll see guys, pull 700-800 pounds with no fucking belt on. Yeah. That gut is like just locked. Yeah. It's like a fucking belt itself, right? Yeah. But the bodybuilders don't do that because they're training visual muscle groups. Yeah. They're not training the overall, base of the like everything that brings everything together. So it's it's I think that's part of it. I think that obviously the more food you eat is going to keep your stomach a little more bloated out, and then it just over years kind of separated a little bit. But I still think that the majority of it is through that heavy training and lack of abdominal training as far as the overall abdominal wall.
So there's a couple of interesting things here. One thing I discovered is there's a hormone called relaxin. Relaxin remodels collagen. When women get pregnant, when their progesterone and estrogen both increase at a high rate, especially progesterone, this relaxin, which is a relative of insulin, by the way, same family, gets released, and it remodels collagen. And what you notice, usually this diastasis recti, which is the separation, usually happens with pregnant women. It's actually quite rare even in obese men.
Yeah.
I have it, by the way. I have almost an inch separating the top two abs. And, I always say on my channel, just for people who don't know, like, I can feel, like, if somebody tried to stab me, I have one. If you get me right there, it'll flow through like butter. There's nothing.
Nothing stops.
That's my kryptonite. Don't stab me there because there's nothing defending it. And that's where that hernia, it's so easy to pop out. Yeah. And of course, you've seen a lot of people with those hernias. Also,
and it's weird because with women, I wonder because if you notice, like pregnant women will have that, and then they'll get that dark line down the center part of the stomach, like by the belly button. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's like a line that comes right through there. I wonder if that has anything to do with that.
That's such a good point. I wonder what the hell that is. You're right.
Yeah.
The other thing is that I do notice it less with powerlifters. It's weird. And strong men, whenever they have more body fat, they're still joined.
Exactly. So powerlifters trained so they train their abdominal wall, but they also train the whole chain that locks in. So that whole crisscross chain that comes into everything, that's one of the first things that most powerlifters are taught right from a very young age. So by the time they get to a point where they're moving like super heavy weight, they can lock all that shit together. So their body is literally functioning as one, mechanic. Where I hate to say it, like bodybuilders think it is, but it's not. It's not, because they're not training that overall chain. They're not training all of those muscle groups, that underlying abdominal muscle group that's underneath the abdominal wall. Like they're not training any of that. And so, they're training that abdominal wall just because, again, it's visual. So that's all that they're focused on. And I think that, powerlifters, again, they're not so focused on that. There are some guys with freaky abs, but most of them are literally more concerned about that lock-in position so that they can lock that in, and, for pulling and squatting and those types of things. And again, it's one of the first things that powerlifters are taught from, a very young age, the minute they get into that sport.
And you never see flexion on their abdominal wall when they're lifting.
Nothing. Like when you see bodybuilders
up and down
doing stuff, and you can see their stomach.
Yeah,
moving,
it's going all over the
moving,
place.
moving. You see a power lifter hit like that. I mean, it may be bubbling over the belt.
Yeah, it may bubble over, but it's firm.
Locked.
Yeah.
It's locked. Yeah. That shit doesn't move. It's like down, up, boom, gone. Yeah. Like there ain't no movement to it.
Yep.
The first time I ever trained with Scott Mendelson, he was like, "What the hell are you doing?" I was like, "Why?" He's like, "You're not breathing." What are you talking about? I never noticed. Apparently, I mean, I squatted.
You hold your breath.
I deadlifted over 500 in high school. I squatted over 400 in high school.
Wow.
I was holding my breath apparently the whole time. I had no idea. Scott's like, "What are you?"
Probably turning purple.
Yeah, and then he's like, "Also, what are you doing with your belly? This is weird stuff going on."
Oh man,
I lift a lot of things. Sometimes you don't learn this unless you got a
abdominal control. Yeah, abdominal controls everything.
Well, most people don't focus on those things. Those are so like, out of the, they're more focused on all the basic shit that like some of the necessity things that should have been implemented or like from the get-go are literally just ignored and forgotten about.
So.
Yeah.
Chad, if you had to advise a young bodybuilder who's like 18 years old, who's thinking, is this the career for me? How can that guy find out if he's got the genetics to make a career out of it in terms of business, even just like being successful enough to
I mean, here's my thing. Like, young kids like 17, 18, don't get me wrong. There are some genetic freaks, that you can look at from a very young age. I've seen some kids, 13, 14 years old that you can just tell, like, look, they don't look like all the rest of the kids, right? Those kids are genetic, and those kids will go on to be athletes in some aspect. Bodybuilding is unique because, and even really, we're talking about now, like, we're not even talking about bodybuilding. We're talking about really, like physique, the physique industry really. And so, that in general, at a young age, it's hard to tell, really, because your body hasn't really taken shape. And, you can look at a lot of guys that, like, I mean, perfect example would be Jay Cutler. Like, I've seen pictures of Jay Cutler at a very young age, and you knew he was big. Like, he was a big guy, but you would have had no idea that he looked like that and was going to end up like Jay looked. Now Ronnie, you saw Ronnie at a very young age. You're like, holy shit, this guy is literally like should be playing for friggin' Cowboys or some shit.
Yeah.
And he actually did play football. Actually, he was a middle linebacker for Grambling.
Was he a good athlete? Was he an athlete growing up?
He was a middle linebacker for Grambling, and he didn't. I think he got injured. I think he ended up with a little injury, and but you can look at him and just know. But I think a lot of guys, kids 16, 17, 18 years old, like their overall structure, and I see this a lot, like with kids, because I have two kids that are both athletes that play football, they train and everything. Most of the kids nowadays are way behind. Like not. I don't want to say that in a bad way. Like,
no, I'm glad to get confirmation.
I'm not talking like mental, like behind. I'm talking like physique wise.
Yeah.
Like they look like. I mean, I can look at kids, in both of their classes. Like Dom's a senior, and I see kids, and I'm thinking like, this kid looks like he's a freshman. But there's kids literally walking around at my youngest middle school that I'm like, how is this kid in middle school? This kid looks like he should be in like the 3rd grade. He is literally like tiny, like
underdeveloped.
Tiny. Yes, and I mean, there's a lot of kids that are just way behind as far as that. And I don't know. I mean, it's kind of weird because me and Kim was talking about this. Like, there seems to be a lot more like preemies that are born where the kids are very, very small nowadays. I know that because I think we read something just not too long ago that like 1 in 3 kids born now are born before the due date, like premature. Like it was something astronomical. Like it was something crazy. That may be off, but I mean, it was something, like that.
It's off
but
though, right?
It's you look at these kids and like these kids are way smaller. Like when I was going to school, like we had one little kid, right? There was like always that one kid that was just smaller than everybody else. Yeah. Everybody else was like normal. And then there was like 5 kids that were bigger than everyone else, right?
Yeah.
It's literally just the opposite now. Every kid is fucking tiny, and there's like 2 kids that are big.
Yeah.
So random. Well, there's interesting things going on. I mean, for example, the the sperm counts are declining every year. I mean, it's shocking. The sperm. Do you know about this? So male sperm counts in the West have declined tremendously in the last 30 years. It's shocking. It's shocking. It's like I think
nutrition. You think
it's over 30%.
It's weird
decline.
because like the rate of kids being born though is higher now though, right?
No, it's declining.
Oh, I thought it was raising. I thought it was higher.
No, it's only raising in Missouri, I think, because you guys have good conservative
values. Possibly. We got sperm galore down in Missouri, dude. Our sperm is big down here.
Well, you know what's funny about that actually is that this new generation, I think you call it Generation Z or something like that, they're supposed to be the first generation that's more conservative than the last one. And they say the reason is actually because now the differences between liberal families having kids, the amount of kids they have, and conservatives is actually playing out in the next generation as most kids from conservative families become conservatives. But basically, the sperm counts are declining at such a rate, and no scientist knows why. It could be phytoestrogens, it could be estrogens from plastics, it could be, who knows what it is. Obviously, if it's some kind of estrogen, it'll send a negative feedback to the hypothalamus to produce less testosterone, you'll get less sperm, but it's not completely clear. So some things are going on for sure. But now let me ask you about my favorite bodybuilder of the past, which is apparently one of your best friends also, which was Nasser. So being Arab, I've always been a fan of Nasser and Ramy and so on. First thing is, was Nasser fully Arab, by the way, or was he half Yugoslavian?
He was actually Egyptian.
Yeah, he's Egyptian, right?
Egyptian, yeah.
100%, right?
100% Egyptian, yeah.
I thought so. You know, the weird thing is that Milos told a story on Dave's show the other day that didn't make sense to me, which was that Ramy's mother, Nasser's mother was actually Yugoslavian or white or European, which didn't make sense because he looks totally Egyptian to me.
I mean, that's possible because I'm trying to think. I met his parents one time. They came to a thing. I'm trying to remember, man. It's been so long. But he was definitely from Egypt. His family lived in Egypt. He was originally from Egypt. I know that for sure. You know, one of the things about Nasser, I mean, like, he was one of those guys that genuinely was a good dude. He had the weirdest personality. Like, he was like kind of a jokestery guy all the time. Like, he was the guy that would literally, like, if you were out hanging out, like, he would be the guy that would walk into the store and walk out with, like, you know, some dumbass hat and, you know, like weird sunglasses on and shit. Like, he was that guy. But when you saw him do it, you're like, no way. The first time he like started doing that, I'm like, dude, what in the hell are you doing? We were in Hawaii, and but he would do the craziest stuff. So we were in Hawaii. We guest posed a couple times with him there, and so we're in Hawaii. We're staying at this hotel. So we go out to eat. We come back home. So we're standing there, and then he's like, we should, we're getting ready to get out of the car. And he's like, we should hang out here for a little bit. And I'm like, what do you think? And he goes, look at all the girls out here. And I'm like, and I'm like, you want to hang out here? And he goes, these are all transvestites. Let's see who picks them up. And so, he goes, let's see who they are. So he wanted to stand. So we stood out there for a little bit, and he goes, yes, this guy right here, this guy's. Look, he's driven around the block 3 times. He is definitely like that.
That's funny. I didn't know he was like that.
Dude, it was the funniest shit ever. And but I mean, he would do crazy shit like that, you know, just crazy stuff. And then, you know, he would call me up and so I mean, just out of the blue, like, so he'd go to the gym and then he'd be like, yes, Chad, how is your day? And I go, it's good. He goes, how was your day? Well, yes, I was at the gym today and I was doing my cardio today. And then this businessman comes in and there's 100 treadmills next to me. Or he goes, there's 20 treadmills next to me. I'm the only one on the treadmill. Of course, he comes in and gets on the treadmill directly next to me. Like, all right. He goes, yes. So he goes, so how was your day? I'm very polite to him. I said, yes, I have a good day. Put my headphones back on. He goes, so what do you do? He goes, oh, I'm a bodybuilder. Oh, yes. Do you train hard for a show right now? And he goes, yes, I always train hard. Are you getting ready for a show? Yes. Here in like 3 months, I will do the Mr. Olympia. So when will you really start training hard? He looks at it, he goes, what do you do? And he goes, I'm an attorney. Yes. Do you have clients every day? Yes. When do you start working really hard for your clients? I do not understand what you mean. Well, like if I only train hard when I'm getting ready for a show. Do you only work hard for your clients when maybe there is money at stake? Everybody else you don't work hard for, but this person you make more money, this person you make more money. I said, what did he say? He said nothing. He went and got on the other treadmill.
Oh my God.
And like, that was the shit that Nasser would do. Like, he goes, yes, can you believe this? Like, I do not train hard this idiot.
Took it so personal.
That's exactly like me, by the way. I get so upset when I'm in a bus and someone comes and sits there. I'm like, what are you doing? I actually get up and I say, do you realize it's empty? I comment, you know? Other people, but I'm very like.
But Nasser was like that. Like, he was like very jokestery, but like he would take stuff personal. He did. This is no shit. I seen him do this 100 times. So we guest posed with him probably 100 times. So after the show, so when you go out with a crowd of people, you're gonna go out, and Nick will know this. So you go out and there's like, you got all the expediters and the show promoter, you got the judges, you got 25 people sitting around a table, right? So you realize you're not getting your food for an hour and a half, right? Yeah. Everybody's going to order. It takes forever. So everybody would order, and you would get to Nasser. He goes, okay, listen, I need my food before everyone else because I actually have a flight that I have to catch. And the lady be like, oh my gosh. She goes, yes, I have a flight I have to catch in an hour and a half. I'm going to probably be late. So you definitely have to make sure that my food gets here before everybody else. I need a chicken Caesar salad. I need that to come out first. And then and he would order everything. This fucker would get his food. This is no shit. An hour before everyone else would get his food. Every single time. Every time.
Hilarious.
And I'm like, dude, yes, Chad, I cannot believe you didn't pick up on this. Yes. And don't ever drink. If you order soda, order it hot, because the soda is already cold. Don't have them put ice in it. If they put ice in it, you're just getting less soda. Make sure they tell them. If you want ice, tell them to bring it in a different glass. This way the glass is completely full of soda.
Oh my God. He was such a particular person.
Yeah.
And was he as smart as people used to
Super
say?
smart. Spoke 7 languages. Like, he was like, he took care of his money. I mean, for as long as I knew him, he drove around in this beat up Ford Probe. And so finally we went out there and I'm like, dude, you gotta get rid of this Probe.
How the fuck did he fit in
exactly.
that thing?
I'm like, dude, you can barely fit in this thing. I go, dude, this thing is literally sitting at an angle. I go, you gotta get something new.
That was 2-door, right? The Probe?
Two-door Probe, yeah.
Yeah, 2-door
Ford
Probe.
Probe was beat to shit. Yeah. And he goes, I do not need these fancy cars. I do not necessarily want money. So then he calls me. He was so proud. He goes, I bought a new car. Well, it is not brand new, but it is a Ford Bronco. It is much bigger, and it is not leaned to the side anymore.
Did Nasser get into like personal beefs with other bodybuilders or other people?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd heard rumors that he had some problems with some people at gyms and this and that, but who knows? Like, he had such a wild personality. Like, he would tell like just, crazy, but Flex done the same thing. Like, Flex would do all kinds of crazy stuff when he was at his like highest point. Like this, I remember being at this place and, he was like, dude, I just kept bugging the shit out of him about nutrition stuff. And he just kept coming up and asking, And eventually it was just like I was annoyed by the dude, right? Yeah. And he was one of those guys that were just kind of like borderline creepy to begin with. And so Flex like pulls him over and I'm thinking like, Flex is getting ready to rip this dude just like a new asshole, right? And then Flex starts telling this story, and I go, dude, what did you tell him? He goes, dude, I was sick of this dude telling me. So I was like telling him about like we were eating fucking cat food and all this shit and all this kind of stuff. And I go, no, you didn't. He goes, no, really, dude. This motherfucker's going to be eating cat food Monday, guarantee you. And I'm like, oh my God, dude, you're so crazy. But dude, I mean, he was one of those guys,
you have to do that though.
Dude, they'll drive you nuts. And Kim was even worse because these fucking guys, Kim would be signing and these guys would be just standing back there like looking all crazy and shit.
Just staring.
Yeah. And Kim would be like, oh,
so awkward. So
and I'm like, has this guy got a picture of that? No, he's just been standing there for 2 hours.
So when Nasser wrote an article for bodybuilding.com that I read when it came out, actually, I remember those days. So I read the article and it was like very aggressive toward Milos and sort of demeaning toward Palumbo, more, not aggressive. He seemed angry at Milos and he seemed like he wanted to make fun of Palumbo. Which Palumbo mainly thing he was saying was Palumbo is the biggest abuser of growth hormone. That's why it looks like that. Because Palumbo looks like that. It doesn't mean that it's from growth hormone. And then with Milos, it was really personal. Like he was,
So I can tell you, so here's the thing. Like I knew, and I talked to him numerous times about both of those things, because when it was bodybuilding.com, he wrote it for bodybuilding.com, and he wrote it was going to be a four-piece thing, and so I talked to him about it. The Milos thing was actually kind of, I think, taken out of context. So he there were certain things that he was mad at Milos about, and it basically just stemmed over money. It's all it was. It just basically stemmed over money. And that's it, and I'm not really going to get into details, but he actually really liked Milos. He actually truly did. He had the utmost respect for Milos. I know that he felt like Milos kind of, there was a money discrepancy there. That's all really all it was. Yeah. And so it just felt like, I think Nasser felt like it's something that should have been squashed, and it wasn't squashed. And it was, and it was one of those things where, like, I think there was money owed, and like Milos thought like he had done something, so it should have covered it. And Nasser didn't think it was covered, and it was honestly just a big fucking misunderstanding type of thing. But I know that it wasn't something that like Nasser held a grudge about. It was just kind of what he thought, right?
Yeah.
Dave, on the other thing, I know that Nasser did not like Dave. Like he didn't like him at all. Like I can tell you this, I never heard him really say much good about Dave, like at all. And again, like I like Dave, I get along with Dave. But he didn't, he felt like Dave like lied a lot about stuff, like, certain things. I know that he had said like he like lied a lot about things like that I don't even remember what
stuff you mentioned in the article, you mean?
What's that?
The stuff you mentioned in the article, you mean?
Yeah, like he just felt like Dave like just lied a lot about stuff and that misled people, and like he didn't like Dave. Like that's like that was Nasser's words. Like he didn't like him. Yeah.
Was he one of those people that thought that Dave had in 2000 when in San Diego that he had maybe had like when he got arrested that it wasn't all?
I don't know if it had anything to do with that. I don't really know what it was about, because again, I think maybe there was something else there, because I didn't really dig deep into that, because it wasn't any of my business at all. Absolutely. Like what their beef was. But like again, like I could just tell like he didn't like Dave. Like there was something there that he disliked Dave about a lot, because he was very vocal, and it wasn't like, like it was very, very negative. Like it was like if you heard him talk, like you would know, like, okay, yeah, you clearly don't like him at all, like stuff. Yeah. But with Milos, you could tell it was like a misunderstanding type thing. And he had the utmost respect. He even said like Milos helped him out a lot at the beginning stages of his career, and like he had a lot of respect for Milos, a lot of respect for him. So
that's so interesting to know. I never knew that. Thanks for telling that. I don't think anyone's ever said that, by the way, on YouTube or anywhere. So nobody. So
I don't know.
Most people think that he hated Milos. So this is really new.
No, yeah, like because I talked to him. It's weird because I was probably one of the last people to talk to him, because they were doing the reunion at the Arnold Classic that year. Yeah. And so they were trying to get Nasser there, and he wouldn't return anybody's calls. And so Arnold and Lormer contacted me, and they're like, hey, listen, like, is there any chance you could like reach out to Nasser, and like, you think it'd be possible to get him here? And I'm like, yeah, I can call him. And I said, I don't, like, he's kind of his own guy. Like if he'll go, he'll go. And so I called up Nasser, and I was like, hey, listen, man, they're doing the reunion. They got all the champions there. They like really want you there. Like Arnold wants you there. And like, you're going to come in. And he's like, are you going to be there? And I'm like, yeah, of course I'm going to be there. Yes, I will come then. I will come. I will stay with, he's like, I will stay with you. I will stay with you then. And I'm like, all right, dude, come in. And so then I called Lauren back, and I'm like, he's in. And he's like, huh? He's in? I'm like, he's in. And so they were booking his flight, like with everything to get him in. And then his dad got sick. And so then he went and, went to Egypt to be with his dad. So he wasn't able to go to that reunion. And then, of course, then he passed away in Egypt. So.
Oh, it was said that he went to Egypt to die. And that was
he went. Yeah, so he went to Egypt to be with his dad because his dad was sick. Now, was he sick also? It's speculation. Like, it's weird. Like, I had seen his blood work 6 months before that, and it was pretty good. There were some kidney issues that were like what I would call kidney issues. Like his creatinine level was starting to go like
2
high.
or 4?
It was a 2. It was actually, I think it was under 2 actually. So I mean, it wasn't like at what I would call kidney failure yet, but it was definitely like going up. Actually, it might have been a 2-1, but I mean, it wasn't like crazy. But I remember like his blood pressure and everything was good. Like everything was pretty good. I know his liver, his enzymes were really high too, but that they ran relatively high, through everything. And I know that he was doing some things at the time, but not like, anything crazy, like the typical bodybuilding stuff, stuff that those guys would do, trying to like maintain a certain level of not to crash off type of thing. But it was weird. Like he was, he had written 4 parts to that piece, I know. And there was some like really, really crazy shit supposedly in it. Like he told me like there was some crazy shit that was getting ready to come out. He's like, because one of the things I thought was that he did not want it to come out before the Arnold. Like he thought if he was going to be at the Arnold, he didn't want it all to come out because like from what I had heard that he was calling out like a bunch of people like within that story. And then I don't know if the story ever like went, but I know it's like he told me he had turned it in, so it's like somebody has it, like it's out there somewhere probably. But there was, I know, a lot of stuff on like some ex-judges that are no longer affiliated now with the IFBB that he called out on some stuff that he had like basic knowledge of and some things. And again, like it's weird because he called them out and then now they're no longer involved, like they've been eliminated from shit. So yeah.
Do you think that he had some of the best genetics you worked with?
I don't know if he had some of the best genetics, but he was a guy that could get big, and he was a workaholic. Like he was a guy that, a lot of people, they're like, oh, I see him train. He didn't train hard. Dude, he trained hard. He trained consistently, and he trained like a certain level all the time. So there was never like, hey, I'm going to take off a little bit and then I'm going to go balls to the walls. He trained, at a like relatively high level every single time he walked into the gym, whether he was in the middle of off season or 3 weeks out from the Olympia. Like his training never changed. It was continuously all the way through, which worked for him,
That's the feeling I got too. For some reason, Nasser has recently developed this reputation of being like a genetic freak mass monster. But what I thought was hard work. I mean, he had great like shoulders and body parts, but it was built through hard work, I felt.
Absolutely. Like you can tell by looking at it, it's, he genetically had a body that would carry, a lot of muscle, but you could tell again, it was something that was like forged in, hard work. Like he wasn't something, it's kind of like a Branch Warren. Like Branch Warren had genetic legs, but, he had to like bust his ass, like half killing himself. He's tore every muscle group, because he literally only knows one way of thinking. That's to go into the gym and fucking go all out. Like that's it. And I don't think he wants to train any other way. And that's the way Nasser was. He trained a certain way and he did it his whole life.
Let's say, how did Nasser train? Was he a heavy guy or?
He was a heavy guy. Yeah. He trained heavy, and it wasn't like, it was a moderate volume. So he trained 10 to 12 range. So it wasn't like in that high volume range.
Stupid high, yeah.
But it wasn't like retarded heavyweight, but it was all like in the middle of the road type, thing. I mean, he was rowing 405, which is, that's fucking a lot of weight. So he wasn't somebody that was pushing like, at the top of the game, but he was at heavy weight across the board with, like your basic tins on everything. But he did it like every time he walked in the gym. Like, so there wasn't a point. Yeah. Like there wasn't a point where it's like, hey, the next 3 months, I'm just going to take it easy and let my joints heal and, do some high rep shit.
Was he injury prone or no?
Dude, I don't, I was thinking about that when I just said that. I don't think I ever remember him ever having an injury.
I don't remember ever reading anything about it.
I don't ever remember it. Yeah. I don't think he ever had any injuries. I mean, there toward the end, he ended up with
aches
all that scar tissue and shit on his shoulders and stuff. But as far as like injuries and stuff, like I don't remember any, none.
Yeah. It has to be contributed to obviously genetics too, but like the way he trained though, it wasn't.
Yeah, like just a gradual movement.
Like Ronnie, forget about it. I mean, that's the shit's.
You
like
knew
horrible.
that shit was gonna happen, dude. Like you can't train like Ronnie, and I don't care how genetic you are.
You ain't
like
walking away from that.
Ronnie out-trained his genetics. So dude, seriously, like as genetic as he was, mentally he was beyond that. So he just out-trained him. Like no body is gonna withstand that shit. You're not gonna squat 800 pounds and do all that shit. And if you watched him, it was like boom. Boom. Like he's walking out there in fucking combat boots, like, you know, putting on a fucking Ensor shirt, squatting 800 fucking pounds, dude.
Fucking
dude,
nuts. Like
eventually your body's gonna be like, fucking enough, dude.
Yeah.
Like if you ain't gonna stop, I'm gonna figure out a way to stop you.
Two more last ones about Nasser. One rumor was that Nasser always loved orals and he liked to take like 100 milligrams of a Dianabol or something like that. Was that real? Was he liked orals?
So he actually didn't like Dianabol. What he liked is Anadrol. So that's what he liked. And so it was weird because like Winstrol, like, you know, there was points where I was like, dude, like I want you to stop using Winstrol, because like he had gotten to a point where like he ended up with so much scar tissue on his body, and the Winstrol that was going around even during that time was non-micronized, so shit wouldn't so it wouldn't, dude, you could barely get it out of a fucking syringe, right? You know, you're putting like oil or watering it down, put B12 in it just to get it started, and so that shit, if it sits for any period of time,
warm it up.
Yeah, exactly. You got it on a fucking candle warmer trying to get this shit to work, and like, you know, and so so, you know, I told him, I'm like, dude, you should switch off of that shit and maybe use, you know, the orals, or I said, you know, even the V can be taken orally, you know. And, yeah, it'll go. And
fucking horrible.
Yeah. And he's like, nah, I don't like those orals. I don't like the oral. So he didn't like a lot of orals, but what he liked was Anadrol. So he loved the way Anadrol like made him feel. He was strong on it. He stayed full on it. He loved the way it made him feel. But it was like Deca, like, you know, like he didn't ever want to take Deca, like ever. Hated it because it made him feel like shit, you know.
Yeah.
So he was kind of, you know, he was a guy that was very, you know, certain things he liked high doses on, like, because I even asked him one time, you know, like, what's the most you ever, because there was rumors that he had taken a ton of like an Anadrol, and he's like, you know, 250 one time, I felt like shit, my eyes were yellow. And I'm like, yeah, way too much, dude.
I have a friend who used to take 20 Anadrols a day, 50 milligrams. It's a true story. I swear to God. He told me he was like for a while too, and he would regularly take like 10 or something.
Did he think that was testosterone or something? Or what did he think he was taking? Like,
he thought he was the strongest man in the world, which he was. But it's an interesting
Holy
fuck.
So a couple. Oh, the last one. There's this huge rumor that Nasser is GH15. Have you ever heard of this guy called GH15 on Get Big Strong?
Yeah.
That spread a lot of information. I don't think it was ever Nasser. Do you?
No, I don't.
Okay, me too. Okay.
So this is what I think. So, and I'll tell you why I think this. And I could be way off on this, but I will tell you what I think. So I asked him, and he told me that he had fed, what's his name, information. What's the dude? Ron Avedon. Okay, so no, Ron Avedon. So he had told me, and he was always pretty honest with me. He's like, no. He goes, I fed Ron Avedon information, but he goes, I was never like, that wasn't my screen name and stuff. I was told that screen name was created to generate, you know, just nonsense on that board, and there was 3 guys that had access to it. And the guy that told me that was a member of Get Big, and then came over to
Professional Muscle.
Mine, Muscle Mayhem. He came over to Muscle Mayhem.
Yours.
Yeah. Okay. When it came, when way back. And then after, like, when it was kind of way after, that guy told me, he's like, hey, you know, it was, and I think they even said like it was like Ron and then 2 other guys was GH15. Now that could be completely fucking fabricated. That could be, you know, like they could have just told me that, because again, I didn't follow GH15, so, or whoever the fuck it was, but I didn't follow it. But Nasser told me that like he fed like Avedon, like information. Like he fed him stories and shit.
You just broke 2013's internet. This is like crazy information for me, for people like me who used to read Page 15 and Wonder, and we used to try. I tried everything that guy did. It was very bad for me, but I tried everything. And anyways, I think also maybe it may have been connected to maybe a lab or something like that. That was.
I don't know. Like, because I even asked him, you know, because it was weird because because they would call out like certain people. If it's the one I'm thinking of, or maybe that was somebody else, but they would call out, because I know they called out like certain people, and it was really odd how, you know, they would do it. And, you know, I even asked him, that was when, you know, I asked him like, dude, is this you? And because I know that like the undercover guy on bodybuilding.com, that was Craig Titus. I know that for a fact. Like Craig Titus told me that. So like, I know that, you know, like I will say Craig Titus was as like, he was that guy that never had like that $20,000 a month, you know, like contract. Like he didn't have that like humongous contract. What he had was 15 small contracts that all ended up paying him 20 grand a month. Like the craziest shit ever, right? Like he was making more money than anybody because he was like this guy, and he'd get paid 500 a month, and this little thing over here for 1,000 a month, and this little thing over here, and like the shit added up. So I like Craig was a hustler, like when it came to that shit. But like I know that's who that was, and I think everybody else is pretty much, you know, aware of that too. But like Nasser told me he was not that guy, but he did say that he fed the Get Big forum information. Like he fed him shit.
Professional Muscle was big too.
I was on Professional Muscle.
Yeah, that was a good one too.
Now, who owned that one? Who owned that one?
It's a Professional Muscle UK, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't there an Australian guy that owned one too? I thought there was a guy from Australia, like maybe an Australian pro that owned one.
It could have been that. I thought it was UK though.
I thought it was UK. I thought it was maybe.
So a couple of last questions. I want to ask you, in Ramy in the UAE, do you know who are his like? Does he have a certain gym that's connected to him, or certain people that support him in the UAE, like in Kuwait?
So
like he had in Kuwait, I mean.
Right. So, I mean, he's all over the place. Like in Kuwait, he was training. Well, originally he was obviously at Oxygen, but then he left Oxygen. And then he was training at a different gym over there. I can't remember the name of it, but he was training over there. Then he went to Dubai. And then
we got stuck in Dubai, right?
Yeah. Well, then he got stuck there for like 6 months, right? He had access to several gyms. One of them was a private gym of a sheik over there.
Yes, that's what I was wondering. Which sheik?
I don't know who it was, but that gym was nuts. Like he literally walked me through, like on like FaceTime one time. It was insane. Like, oh my God, I'd never seen, like the whole thing was marble. Like he had his own bathroom with like walk-in closet, and it was crazy, like insane crazy. And they had that, but then even Dubai locked down.
Yeah, very badly.
So they even locked all that down. So there was a point when he didn't have access to a gym at all, and it was tough because they got that all locked down, and then then you get into April 24th. So then you go into Ramadan. So then we have to so literally we're only able to get like 3 meals in at night, trying to get meals in and stuff. That went until I think May 25th or something like that. So during that whole time, it was a.
Wait, Chad, I don't want to cut you off, but how does he do Ramadan? Like, doesn't he get hungry?
Well, he can eat at night, so there's a period that he can eat, but but still,
it reverses the day, right?
Yeah. So
but still, though, even though it's like a big over,
you're only getting 3 meals in, basically. So it's tough. Like, so
I would have never survived as a big man like that. I would have been dead.
I told him, dude, we're gonna detox during that time is what we're gonna do. Like, we're gonna clean that shit out. Make sure you're like healthy as fuck, right?
That's rough.
And it was good anyway, because like he was basically clean up until that point. So like we were able to really focus on his health and just making sure, like, dude, he was 300 and some pounds. His fucking blood pressure was just retarded. Like, I mean, it was like the best blood pressure I've ever seen.
Really?
That's wild. That's wild.
It was ridiculous. Like, yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah. It was like 124 over 64 or some shit. I mean, it was ridiculous. Like Like I'd
You're
never
like, no,
seen
that can't
anybody.
be right.
Yeah, like, and everything, blood work, perfect.
Yeah.
Like,
Wow,
I mean,
that's great news.
perfect.
So happy.
Yeah.
Hey, if you ever find out who his guys are, and if you get a chance to ask him, I'd love to know, because I grew up in Dubai and I might know them. I'm very curious to know.
Yeah, I'll ask him who does. I know, I mean, he's got a couple guys that, kind of hang out with him. Coach Tal is kind of his manager and kind of.
Yeah, that's who I know.
Yeah, and he sets up a lot of his stuff and takes care of a lot of his things and stuff. And then he's got another guy that does a lot of things.
He just signed with some other management company I saw, or whatever they're working with.
Yeah, or I think it's a
not management, but like
it's like a
he's a promoter or something over there.
Yeah, it's like it's almost like what do I want to say, I don't want to say, but it's like a group of guys that come together and like
right.
Like promotional things,
promotional stuff. Yeah.
They
like sponsor like big events and stuff like that.
Yes, and stuff. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Hey, Nick, a quick question for you. I noticed yesterday you're following a guy called Suhail Khan.
Yeah, I saw you ask me. So
how did you meet Suhail Khan?
I didn't meet him. I don't even know him.
This is just a weird question.
I saw him in a photo with Larry.
Yeah. Suhail is the guy I introduced to my buddy who owns the Lions, who introduced him to Larry. Suhail is the guy I introduced to them. By the way,
I followed him a long time ago.
I was like, why is he not following me on Instagram? And you guys are following. I'm like, what's going on? I messaged him. I'm like, do you know I have this account? I'm the one who introduced you to everybody. He's like, oh no, I follow you. He's like all my pictures.
Oh my god, so funny. I just commented on the photos when he was with Larry or something or whatever.
Loves arm wrestling. Yeah, I could introduce you to those guys.
That's hilarious.
Cool. Okay, so
you're talking about Wheels, Larry Wheels?
Yeah, Larry Wheels. Yeah, he's over there now. I just saw that guy.
All over there.
I saw Morgan is over there now too with him. You see, like, Morgan Estat, the guy that's like 6'7", big white guy, bald head. He was in California.
The beard? Got the beard?
I think he might have had a beard. He's a big. He just turned pro at last year. He did the amateur Olympia, I think. He's ginormous, the guy, big white guy. He's like 6'5". He's like 300 something.
Dude, I know the guy that trains with him all the time is that Andrew Jacked kid.
Oh, that guy is fucking.
Dude, that kid is a fucking freak of nature. I
was telling Leo about it. I'm like, bro, his genetics are
retarded.
Insane. Mind blowing. Are you still working with what's his name? The other black kid.
Blessing was over there. Blessing. Yeah. So Blessing was over there. Blessing, I'm working with Blessing, and Blessing was over there for.
He was over there for a minute, right?
Yeah. Well, what happened was he's from Ireland. So that's where he's from, is from Ireland.
Stop. Really?
Yeah. He's from Ireland. His family lives in Dublin. He's Irish.
Wow.
Yeah.
Shut the fuck up.
Dude, you know how I found that out? So again, you
don't tell me 23andMe.
No, but my son Morgan did. So
Morgan figured it out.
So he started following him originally, and he's like, "Dude, you got to work with this guy." And I'm like, "Who?" And he goes, "This Blessing guy, man." He goes, "First of all, he's funny as shit, but yeah, he's Irish." And I'm like,
"I love Blessing."
I go,
he's awesome.
"Dude, that fucker ain't Irish." And he goes, "No, he's from Ireland." And he goes, "No, he's from Ireland." And I'm like, "What?"
So he lives in Florida, I guess.
Yeah, but he's from Dublin, and so he went over there to spend time with his family. So he was there, and he was hoping that he would be able to fly home. And so the game plan, he thought, because there's a band in Dublin or whatever, you can't get to the U.S. So he was going to fly to Dubai and then fly home, because you can't fly. But when he flew to Dubai, they, looked at his passport, realized that he came from Ireland, and no go. So he just decided to stay there for, a couple months, and just, basically, film and get, basically social media content. And, dude, it worked out fucking spectacular, because, we're basically trying to put on size. And so who's he end up training most of the time with is fucking Larry Wheels and Andrew Jack.
Andrew.
So those two fucking freaks in nature, I told, Blessing, I go, dude, this, like, if you're going to be stranded someplace,
this is great.
You're in a bulking phase, like, this was the play.
He's got crazy genetics too, though. He has to, right?
Dude, he's really, I mean, he's
got to be gifted in some ways. I mean, obviously he works hard, but
he's got freaky genetics.
Like,
I mean, he's
Kai
young,
Green
too,
back.
He's young. Everything, is starting to kind of progress right now. So, I mean, I think,
I'm glad he's still with you.
Yeah, he's a good dude too. Like me and him clicked right off the bat. Like me and him clicked right off the bat. So I mean, it was good right, instantly.
I think he could do really well.
Dude, I think he'll have a really good like pro debut, and I think over the next 2 to 3 years, he will be somebody that will be a force.
And if he comes in shape with you, he's going to do very well. He's got enough muscle in his body already. Yeah. So I mean, that's not even a problem.
We needed to bring his legs up a little bit and just kind of balance things out a little bit. So I wanted to drop those lats a little bit, just to kind of tie him.
He has like that Kai Green shell on his back.
He's got that monster thick. Dude, his
connects to the bottom of his fucking rib. It's fucking
hangs. So it but he's the hard worker, good dude. One of the things I told him was, in the past he had been, he had done like off season is just kind of, eat as much as you can type of thing. And we became very structured, off season, and his body just blew up, but still stayed in pretty good shape. So, I mean, he sent me a picture the other day where he had just broke 300 pounds. So,
well, I saw that photo he put up in the mirror. I was like, that's got to be Photoshopped. There's no fucking way that man
300 fucking pounds. Yeah.
Bro, like mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. Like it's crazy.
I think, he's a guy that's going to be a force, and it's crazy because the game plan, because he turned pro at the Columbus Arnold, right?
Right. Yeah. The Arnold.
So I'm like, dude, you got to do the fucking Arnold. Like, that's what we got.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
You turned pro there. Right. But but I knew like 2 months ago that wasn't going to happen.
Like, they postponed it already.
Yeah. I knew 2 months ago it wasn't going to happen. So that one in Australia. So they're both fun. So, we're like, looking at possibly.
I wouldn't even stress about it right now, right?
Yeah. So we're looking at, we're like right now his body is growing. So I told him, I'm like, dude, there ain't no reason to shut this shit down. Let's just keep growing.
No, definitely not.
Isn't it funny that there are some countries that like you don't expect people to be from? Like you said, Blessing is Irish.
Dude, when my son told me that, I'm like, dude, no chance. And he goes, no, he's Irish. And I'm like,
he's on that Irish kick.
I'm like, dude, no chance. And then he's like, Dad, trust me, he's Irish. And it's funny, we were all at the Olympia, and so Blessing was over there, and so there was only a few people like that Morgan really wanted to meet, and so we were kind of standing over there, and like here he comes, and I'm like, and so Blessing came up, and then so we got to meet him and everything, and so this was at the Olympia, so I hadn't started working with him yet, and so we got a picture taken and stuff, and so when we were walking away, he's like, you got to work with him. Like you definitely, you got to work with him, right? You got to work with him. So then Aaron called me and he's like, hey, listen, you're going to take on new people? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, well, I was talking to Blessing, and I'm like, yeah, dude, trust me. I go, that's a done deal. I said, like my son, like already said, that's got to happen.
The interesting thing about it is that, in the West, we expect that immigration is normal. Every country accepts immigration, but actually there are countries in the world that don't accept immigration. Like, what if I told you I was Japanese? You wouldn't believe me because they don't accept immigrants.
Right.
Korea does not accept. Dubai, where I lived for many years, you can live there generationally. You'll never get a citizenship. It's not allowed. They don't give out citizenships. So
I didn't know that.
It's interesting that in the West, like sometimes if you don't support immigration, people will be like, that's so evil. But there are countries that will never allow anyone. Like you could stay there generations. It's pretty interesting.
I think Dubai right now, I think we're going to see more and more people go to Dubai.
Well,
just for the simple fact, yes, because based off of what they have over there, like access to over there, the foods that they have over there, the gyms that they have over there.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see more and more. Obviously, from what I've heard, like the cost of living is, a little steep, but like if you've got somebody that's like sponsoring you or whatever, then helping you out over there, then like
that's whatever.
Yeah, then it's good.
And the cost of living isn't actually steep. It's just people say that because they want to live luxuriously. Actually, Dubai is an interesting city. You could live very cheap. Like you could live way cheaper than like you could live Alabama prices.
Can you live in a nice home or apartment?
No, not a nice place.
Nice, yeah, because because I had an athlete, so Brad Willis, like they were getting ready to shut down the UK, so he went to Dubai. He was going to train there for a month, and I know that he said like the first place that he went into was like, oh fuck no, like this,
wow,
like
okay.
it smelled, like he said, like no chance. He had to move like a couple times until he found a place that was like really nice and
interesting.
You know,
Okay.
and, yeah, so he said there was some places, and like he was, you know, because he originally showed it on his story, and I thought like, yeah, it looks pretty good, but it just wasn't. I guess it was in a bad area, just like not like a. He said it just wasn't that nice, like way, like
if you
way.
need any
lower.
tips, just ask me. I know it inside out like the back of my hand. I could tell you which hotels, everything, where they should stay, which apartments, all of that. But so I'm very conscious of your time, Chad, and Nick is getting sleepy, and he has to be up tomorrow morning.
I gotta be up in 3 hours.
So I
gotta go to bed in 3 hours.
Okay. So I wanted to tell you what I had planned for the remainder. So I wrote down notes. You know how people send people's protocols around. So I've seen some claimed protocols of yours. So I wanted to talk to you about vitamins, minerals, how you use them, things like that. But I don't think we have time for that today. But I want to let you know, I really wanted to talk about your son, especially. I'm really interested in how you invest in him and developing him, and in what you think of how your genetics mixed, because you did get to 300 pounds and your wife was a specimen.
Yeah.
So there's something going on there, which is, and I wonder if other bodybuilders are finding that with their children, the ones that.
It's interesting because, you know, I think, like, there's no doubt I had strength, you know, like, I mean, I still am pretty strong as far as certain things right now, even at my, you know, age and stuff, you know, size wise, I was able to get to a certain point. Kim obviously had elite genetics. Like I said, she competed before she trained, but the interesting thing was her father, who was, so he was Russian. He was basically a football coach her entire life. So he was actually drafted by the Los Angeles Rams, but wasn't able to actually fulfill that dream. He ended up having to go to the Korean War. So he never ended up playing in the pro ranks. So that's why you'll see my son a lot of times hashtag unfinished business.
Yeah, I see all the time.
Yeah, he'll hashtag unfinished business because, like, you know, he says like he's going to finish grandpa's legacy type of thing. And so, you know, it's one of those things where, but she told stories like where, you know, like the guys would be like horsing around in the weight room and they'd be kind of jackassing around in there, and he hadn't trained for 6 months and he would go in and literally just throw 405 on and just rep it. Boom, 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 boom.
Damn.
Yeah.
Wait, he bench presses 405?
Without even warming up.
At 14?
405? No.
Oh,
but her father. So her father was a football coach.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
So
that's
her father was a football coach.
I got it.
And basically, like, he, you know, they would be, you know, horsing around, you know, in the gym. And so he would like, oh, let's go. And like he'd put 405 on there and just crank it out. Like, boom, boom.
What's Morgan benching now?
But he did bench. So he did bench 365 though at 13. So 365 at 13.
Fucking crazy.
So he had football, so he hadn't trained really anything for about almost 3 months. We just now started back in. He just repped 315 for 4, pulled 405 on deadlift for 5.
Oh my God.
So, like, I mean, his strength is nutty. Like he hit 2.25 tonight on front press, like seated front press military for 8.
Wow. That's insane.
What impresses me the most is this unfinished business hashtag and the mindset.
So he'll put that,
I know, I love
that
the
on
mindset.
there a lot. Yeah. So like I said, like he has like that regimented mindset. So everything he does is calculated 10 steps ahead. So everything he does. And the great thing about him is like he doesn't pay attention to anything. Like all the nonsense, like he can post something up and like there can be a troll on there, and I'm like, hey, did you see the troll? He's like, nope. I'm like, he goes, what did it say? And I'm like, if you didn't see it, don't worry about it. He goes, like that shit doesn't
phase him
at all, because it was one of the things that I told him. I'm like, listen, if you're gonna get on social media, you realize there's gonna be a lot of hate on here, this and that.
I remember when we did the podcast right before you made the Instagram, and we were talking about that whole situation.
And we went into that a lot because I didn't want that. Like I didn't want to deal with it. Yeah. And like it doesn't even faze him because like to him, like he already knows what he wants to do. He is, everything is set in motion. He doesn't give a shit what anybody else is doing because he feels like, you know, like this is no shit. Like one time there was something I was doing, I don't remember what it was, and I said like, dude, we gotta get to work. Like, you know, like you gotta understand, like no matter what you're doing, there's always somebody else working harder. And he's like, no. I am the somebody else. I'm the one that's working harder.
I love your son.
Nobody's ever gonna work harder than me.
Does the other brother envy him?
So no. So here's the thing. So the other brother is different. So he's a different beast. He's a genetic freak. Okay.
Oh, okay.
He's a genetic freak. He could be.
Does he know that?
He does. That's the problem.
Oh,
he could be a freak of nature, but he's the guy that's like, hey, listen, man, I can walk around at 240 pounds. I can train and do this and still fucking play video games and do this shit, blah, 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 blah. So he's a kid that wants to do like whatever I can do the least.
I got you.
And still get the most out of.
I got you.
So, but it is, you know, like Morgan is starting to rub off on him a little bit because like Morgan's at the age now where it's like, dude, like at the gym is like, dude, you train calves? And he's like, yeah, I train calves. It's like, bullshit, you didn't train fucking calves. Go train fucking
Put him on blast.
Yeah, he's like, you didn't train calves. Go train calves.
Wait, you named him Morgan. That's why he loves Ireland.
But so isn't that weird? Yeah, and that's so we named him Morgan,
I didn't think about that.
That's actually an Irish name.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah,
okay.
and again, like we had no idea.
So look, I just want, that's not even the rest of, look, I just want to show you. I have 3 more pages of questions for you. So if you'll ever grace us with your presence,
we'll do it again sometime.
You would honor me so much. I'll keep these because these are, they're actually
we'll
good.
Just finish it.
Yeah.
We'll do this and then we'll finish it, man. Yeah.
I would stay with you, but Nick is being sleepy. So